There are stories so old, so deeply woven into the fabric of our oldest traditions that they seem to predate history itself. Stories whispered around fires in ancient deserts, carved into sacred stone with trembling hands, passed from generation to generation like an echo that refuses to die. Among these tales, told not just in one land, but across the scattered cradles of civilization, there is a recurring vision, one that stands tall, both literally and figuratively, above the rest. The ancients spoke of giants, but not just any giants. These were not lumbering ogres of folklore, nor creatures of chaos and ruin. These were beings of majesty, towering radiant and strange. Some say they descended from the heavens on beams of light. Others claim they arrived in ships of fire and wind. They came from the stars, the elders said, from the skies above, and they changed everything. In the lands of Egypt, long before the pharaohs etched their names into history, there were already whispers of such visitors. Not gods, not men, but something in between. Inscriptions found on half-erased walls speak of beings who walked taller than three men, their skin said to shimmer with the color of sunlit bronze. They did not come to rule, but to build, to raise up great temples, to instruct the people, to move stones that even now defy understanding. To the east, in the cradle of Sumer, the oldest known civilization, similar tales echo from the depths of clay tablets and mythic songs. There they are known as the Anunnaki, heavenly ones descended to earth with a mission shrouded in ambiguity. Some portray them as stewards of humanity, guides in the arts of agriculture, astronomy, and rule. Others hint at darker truths of control, of manipulation, of hybrid bloodlines forged between stars and soil. Further south in the ancient highlands of Ethiopia, oral traditions, carried by priests and mystics, tell of skyborne visitors who crafted monuments in the blink of an eye, massive, perfect, enduring. They speak of hills flattened in a single night of stones that floated into place as if obeying a silent command. These were not gods of thunder or war, but tall, watchful figures who taught the people to plant, to write, to measure time by the stars. Could these be mere myths, tales invented to fill the gaps in memory and explain the impossible achievements of our ancestors? Perhaps. And yet, there is something oddly persistent in these stories. Across continents and cultures separated by oceans and millennia, the same imagery returns: sky giants descending, teaching, building, sometimes worshipped, sometimes feared, but always larger than life. And not just in word. Their fingerprints, if we dare call them that, seem etched into stone. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed with such precision and scale that even modern engineers struggle to explain its creation. Or the temple complex of Baalbek in Lebanon, where stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons rest with uncanny alignment too large for even today's cranes to lift with ease. Or the megaliths of Ethiopia's Tigray region, some standing alone, some lost beneath earth and root, all far older than written history dares to admit. Were these structures built by human hands alone? Or did our ancestors, standing at the dawn of civilization, receive a nudge, perhaps even a blueprint, from beings far more advanced? In the dense Amazon jungle, two tales persist of white giants who came from the sky and taught the first tribes to count the days and plant by moonlight. And in the deserts of Peru, the Nazca left behind enormous geoglyphs visible only from the sky, as if drawn for the eyes of those who came from above. Coincidence, perhaps, or invitation. Even the Old Testament, that ancient manuscript of myth and morality, speaks of a time when the sons of God came down unto the daughters of men, and giants, the Nephilim, were born of that union. Strange lines for Scripture. Stranger still, that echoes of this idea surface in the myths of Mesopotamia, India, Africa, and beyond. Somewhere in the tangled web of these stories lies a mystery. Not the kind solved by a single artifact or a stroke of luck, but the deeper kind, the ones that linger in the space between truth and belief. The kind that invites us not to answer, but to wonder. Who were these giants of the sky? Were they symbols misunderstood, metaphors of early human contact with knowledge? Were they legends grown from the seeds of awe at nature's power? Or perhaps the faint memory of a lost epic dimly remembered in stone and song? Or were they something else entirely? As we begin our journey through these legends, let us not rush to conclusions. Let us instead walk slowly, step by step, along the paths our ancestors once walked, heads tilted skyward, eyes filled with questions. Let us listen not for the thunderous voice of certainty, but for the subtle music of mystery that still hums in forgotten places. Because before we explore the evidence, before we measure and date and theorize, we must first hear the story. And this, dear listener, is where it begins. To speak of giants from the sky is to walk a careful line between myth and memory, between the soaring imagination of ancient peoples and the quiet discipline of archaeological research. And yet to dismiss these accounts outright as fantasy would be to overlook one of the most remarkable aspects of early human civilization, its capacity to encode wonder, mystery, and perhaps even knowledge within the shell of story. Our journey begins where civilization itself is believed to have taken its first breath, Mesopotamia. In the vast plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians etched humanity's earliest known writing into clay. Theirs was a world of priest-kings, temple ziggurats, and carefully measured stars. But in the myths they preserved, there were beings who did not resemble men. The Anunnaki, they were called those who came down from the heavens. Not metaphorically, not as spiritual ideals, but as literal presences, beings that descended from the sky to shape the world of men. These Anunnaki were said to have lived among humans, to have taught agriculture, given laws, and set in motion the rhythms of the calendar. In the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, the gods formed mankind from clay and the blood of a rebel deity, suggesting that humanity itself was a hybrid creation fashioned by beings from beyond. Scholars today debate whether these accounts were spiritual allegory or something stranger. But one fact remains: the Sumerians insisted again and again that their knowledge came from the stars. Thousands of miles to the west, in ancient Egypt, another civilization rose, apparently fully formed. The earliest dynasties already displayed advanced knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and engineering. The priests of Heliopolis told stories of gods who came from a star called Sirius, beings who ruled in Egypt long before human kings during what they called the first time, or Zep Tepi. This epic, the texts claimed, was an age of light and great works, when mighty beings from the sky walked upon the Nile's shores. Later, pharaohs claimed descent from them, not merely in spirit, but in blood. The pyramid texts, among the oldest religious inscriptions in the world, reference stairways to the heavens, boats in the sky, and celestial beings descending to guide the soul of the deceased. Were these just poetic metaphors for the afterlife, or faint recollections of something more literal, sky-faring visitors glimpsed once and never forgotten? Anthropologists have long noted the consistency of sky-being stories across the ancient world. In Mesoamerica, the Maya spoke of tall, pale-skinned gods who came from the stars and taught them to count the days and track the heavens. The god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, is described not as a dragon or beast, but as a wise teacher who emerged from the sky and vanished across the sea. In Andean legend, the Viracochas, bearded, radiant figures, likewise came from the sky, built massive stone cities, and disappeared mysteriously after imparting knowledge. Such similarities might be dismissed as coincidence. Cultures independently developing sky deities is not inherently strange. But when we look closer at the precision, the geometry, the messages encoded in their monuments, a different picture begins to take shape. Consider Baalbek in Lebanon. Here lie some of the largest stone blocks ever quarried and placed by human hands. The base stones of the Temple of Jupiter, known as the Trilithon, weigh upwards of 800 tons each. They sit upon an earlier foundation, perfectly aligned, as if placed by a hand that understood weight tension and time on a scale we still struggle to comprehend. How these stones were moved, raised, and set without modern machinery remains unexplained. Could a forgotten technology, perhaps taught by unknown builders, have once existed? In Ethiopia, the sacred city of Axum tells a quieter story. Its stelae, towering stone obelisks up to 100 feet tall, carved and transported centuries ago. Local legends speak of sky giants who lifted them into place as easily as spears. These are not vague tales. They are specific, consistent, and often tied to ceremonial sites still revered today. The Orthodox Christian tradition of Ethiopia, rich with ancient echoes, holds that angels guided the construction of sacred places, celestial beings intervening directly. Skeptics rightly point out that oral traditions change over time. A tale of a brilliant leader can over generations become a myth of a god. But even so, why the fixation on height? Why always the sky? Why the detail of radiant skin, glowing eyes, immense strength, and advanced knowledge? In India, the ancient Vedas and epics like the Mahabharata describe flying machines called vimanas, used by gods and heroes alike. These texts are not vague. They describe propulsion aerial battles and cities in the sky. One might argue these are the imaginative flourishes of poets. Yet they are often rooted in scientific terms: geometry, metallurgy, even references to energy sources that mirror concepts only rediscovered in the modern era. Meanwhile, in the highlands of Iran, the Elamite civilization, older than even Babylon, crafted immense ziggurats that reached for the heaven stairways to nowhere. Their inscriptions speak of the Watcher's great beings who came before, who warned, who built. This theme of a once present, now absent race of tall, radiant builders is one of the most haunting and consistent motifs in ancient storytelling. Not just myth, not just religion, but embedded within the very foundations of civilization, its temples, calendars, laws, and language. Science, of course, offers other explanations. The idea of cultural convergence, the phenomenon where different societies independently develop similar myths and practices, is well established. Human beings everywhere look up at the stars. Everywhere, they dream of beings greater than themselves. But convergence does not explain the engineering, nor the alignment of monuments across the globe, with stellar bodies, especially Orion's belt and Sirius, nor the mathematical codes embedded in stone ratios, constants, patterns that seem to whisper of knowledge beyond mere survival. It is also curious that some of the most ancient sites on Earth appear to decline in sophistication over time. The earliest construction is often the most precise, the most massive, the most aligned. Later generations, though closer to our time, could not match it. We see this in Giza, in Sacsayhuaman, in Baalbek, as if those who came later tried to imitate a style they no longer fully understood. Is it possible that memory fades not just in people, but in cultures? That the stories of sky giants are fragments of an even older story, one that predates language itself? A story, perhaps once witnessed, then mythologized, then half forgotten. Today, we live in a world that prizes hard evidence, and rightly so. Yet we must remember that for tens of thousands of years, the only way to preserve a truth was to turn it into a story. And the older the story, the deeper its root, the more care we must take in dismissing it. Archaeology seeks the material tools, bones foundations. Mythology seeks the immaterial meaning, memory vision. But what if in the case of the sky giants, they are simply two halves of the same truth, one carved in stone, the other whispered in legend? As we turn now toward the anomalies themselves, the physical puzzles, these stories seem to orbit. We must hold space in our minds for both, for reason and for wonder, because sometimes it is in the narrow distance between the two where the deepest truths reside. The earth remembers what the mind forgets. Scattered across continents in jungles, swallowed by time in deserts, chiseled by wind and on mountaintops, kissed by ancient skies, there lie great stones, too large, too perfect, too enduring. They do not belong to the world as we know it. They are older than memory and stranger than logic. And at the heart of their mystery stands a single haunting question: who placed them there? Let us begin in Lebanon, at the ancient ruins of Baalbek. Here, embedded within the foundations of a Roman temple, are three stones, each weighing more than 800 tons. Known as the trilithon, these megaliths are not decorative. They are structural foundational, aligned with an uncanny precision. To move them today, even with modern cranes, would require monumental effort. Yet there they lie, set upon earlier stones even larger than themselves, as if laid gently by a hand that feared no weight. No tool marks, no quarry trails, no evidence of how or when they were moved. Just stone silence and gravity defied. Local legends say the stones were placed there by giants, not metaphorical giants, but real beings, immense in stature, descended from the sky, who once walked the earth before the coming of men. The Romans themselves, despite building atop the platform, had no record of constructing its lower layers. They too inherited a mystery. Further south, along the Nile's winding spine, we arrive at the Great Pyramid of Giza, a monument so vast, so precise, that even today it defies complete explanation. Over 2 million blocks, some weighing up to 70 tons, are arranged with mathematical perfection. The base is nearly level to within a fraction of an inch. The sides align almost exactly with the cardinal directions, and the internal chambers angled passages shafts that point to stars. Chambers whose purpose remains elusive suggest more than a tomb. They whisper of design intent and knowledge far beyond the expectations of a Bronze Age society. And within the king's chamber lies a granite box cut from a single piece of stone polished smooth, emitting faint magnetic signatures. But it is too large to have passed through the narrow corridors, which means it was placed before the pyramid was built around it. That single detail fractures the story of step-by-step construction. It suggests the builders planned not from the ground up, but from the center outward, as if guided by something other than trial and error. In the high Andes of Peru, in a place called Sacsayhuaman, walls rise from the earth like frozen waves, massive stones interlocked without mortar, fitted so tightly that not even a blade of grass can pass between them. Some stones have 12 or more angles, all perfectly aligned. The surfaces are smooth curved and shaped as if the rock had once been soft. But andesite, the stone used here, is not soft. It is harder than steel. To shape it with bronze tools, as officially suggested, is to strike water with a feather. And yet the walls stand defying erosion, defying gravity, defying explanation. The Inca inheritors of this place never claimed to have built it. They said it was the work of the gods' giants from the sky, who molded the mountains themselves. From Peru, we cross the Pacific to Nan Metal, a floating stone city off the coast of Micronesia. Built on a lagoon, it consists of 92 artificial islands constructed from massive basalt logs stacked like timber. Some weigh up to 50 tons. The quarry is on another island, over water, and miles away. There are no records of how the stones were moved. No ramps, no pulleys. Just legend of levitation, of song of visitors from beyond the sea who commanded the stone to rise. Time and again, we find the same pattern. Monumental stones, impossible transportation, no written records, and always, always a whisper of someone else, someone who taught, who built, and then disappeared. Even in modern times, attempts to replicate these feats have failed. Engineers using modern cranes have struggled to lift replicas of Baalbek stones. Experiments in quarrying and dragging stones over sand as proposed for Giza have proven limited and inefficient. And yet, the ancients built not one or two, but hundreds of such structures across vast distances and diverse cultures, with no shared language, no shared tools, and no obvious link. Unless there was a shared teacher. Consider the mathematical alignments. The Great Pyramid encodes P in the golden ratio. So do temples in Mexico, in Cambodia, in India. Many are aligned to solstices, equinoxes, and star systems. The pyramids at Teotihuacan in Mexico are aligned to Orion's belt, just as those at Giza. Even more curious, The layouts match the spacing, the angle, the orientation, as if designed by the same mind. The coincidence becomes eerie when one realizes these cultures had no contact with each other. Separated by oceans, by millennia, by all known history. Yet they built the same shapes, told the same stories, remembered the same visitors. Then there is the anomaly of the stones themselves. Some megaliths emit faint levels of radiation. Others show signs of having been softened or melted before shaping an effect we cannot replicate without industrial-grade equipment. In some cases, magnetic fields fluctuate around ancient temples, disrupting compasses and electronics, as if the stone remembers an energy long since lost. In India's Ellora caves, entire temples are carved from a single rock, excavated from the top down with no scaffolding or chisel marks. The Kailasa temple is one such marvel. Legends say it was built in a single night by celestial architects. Such tales are easy to dismiss until one sees the precision, the scale, the silent defiance of time. Then doubt begins to fray. Are we looking at the remnants of a forgotten technology, one that worked with vibration, sound, or energy in ways we no longer understand? Or are these marks of beings who came before us, not gods, not aliens, but a prior civilization now erased from the record? If such a civilization existed, what destroyed it? Flood fire time, or perhaps like the sky, giants in legend, they simply left having finished their work, having seeded knowledge across the earth like scattered stardust. Perhaps they were never meant to stay, only to build, to teach, and to vanish. What remains is the stone, the pattern, the stories told in silence. No hard proof, but no easy answers either. Just questions, carved into granite. Questions that echo louder than any voice. What do we make of these silent colossi of stone? What voice do they speak with, if not language? The academic world has long sought to tame these enigmas, to bind them with reason. And yet, like a mirage that disappears when approached, the answers slip through the grasp of certainty. Let us begin with what is known, or at least what is widely accepted. Mainstream scholars assert that the megalithic structures across the ancient world were constructed by the cultures in whose territories they are found. The ancient Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Romans, the Incas all had labor forces, religious motivations, and rudimentary tools sufficient in theory to create what we see. For example, the Great Pyramid of Giza, according to most Egyptologists, was built over a period of 20 to 30 years during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, around 2500 BCE. It is suggested that tens of thousands of workers, perhaps conscripted farmers during the off-season of the Nile floods, moved the stones using sledges, ropes, and sheer human will. Recent experiments with lubricated sand have shown that dragging heavy blocks becomes more feasible under certain conditions. The platform at Baalbek, some say, was likely a Roman construction, or perhaps an older Phoenician or Hellenistic foundation, later incorporated by Roman builders. Even if the Romans lacked direct documentation, their architectural ingenuity was formidable, and the presence of unfinished stones nearby hints at traditional quarrying practices. As for Sacsayhuaman, scholars suggest that the Inca, using patient effort and community labor, shaped stones with repeated abrasion, leveraging hammerstones, and trial and error-fitting. While time-consuming, it may have been possible over generations. These are the practical answers. And yet, even among those who champion them, a quiet uncertainty often lingers. Because despite the equations and reconstructions, something never quite fits. If human labor explains the stones, why is the same level of engineering not replicated elsewhere in those same cultures? Why do many sites show a sudden drop in sophistication in later editions? Why are older structures often more precise than newer ones? Why is there a lack of records, not just of construction methods, but of motivation? Why no inscriptions? Boasting of these marvels, ancient rulers recorded their triumphs in stone, song, and scroll. Yet in some of the world's most impressive structures, there is silence. Perhaps the answer lies not just in how they were built, but why and by whom. Among the most compelling alternative theories is the notion of a forgotten civilization, one predating those we know capable of feats we have not yet fully understood. Proponents of this view suggest that at some point, perhaps before the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, a global cataclysm wiped out an advanced society. Flood myths found across cultures may hint at a shared memory of this destruction. From the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical deluge to the tales of Manu, in India water is often the agent of divine reset. In this theory, the survivors of that civilization, engineers, priests, teachers spread across the world, preserving fragments of lost knowledge. They became the sky gods, the giants, the culture bringers remembered in myth. They taught agriculture, astronomy, and stonework, and then they vanished into legend. Structures like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 9600 BCE, and built with remarkable sophistication, are often cited as evidence that humanity's first great leap happened earlier than we thought. Another hypothesis suggests that ancient builders possessed an understanding of sound and frequency, perhaps even levitation through resonance. This idea is fueled by legends Tibetan monks chanting stones into the air, Egyptian priests using tones of power, and indigenous stories of songs that moved mountains. Some researchers point to ancient instruments and harmonic chambers as clues. The inner design of pyramids with resonating shafts and acoustic properties may not be accidental. Modern experiments have shown that sound waves can influence matter in precise ways known as cymatics. While speculative, the idea that ancient engineers used sound to manipulate stone is not as far-fetched as once believed. It would explain the lack of tool marks and the impossibly smooth cuts on hard stone. And then there is the most controversial yet persistent theory of all that beings not of this earth once visited, and in doing so left behind their mark. This theory draws from ancient texts describing gods descending in fiery chariots, from the Sumerian Anunnaki to the Mayan Kukulkan. These beings are said to have brought light knowledge and sky-born wisdom. The alignment of monuments with celestial bodies, the similarity of myths across continents, and the recurring theme of visitors from the stars form the core of this view. The Nazca lines in Peru, visible only from the air, the precision of the Giza pyramids, the sudden appearance of mathematics and metallurgy, these are cited as possible evidence of contact. Of course, mainstream science rejects this hypothesis as lacking verifiable proof. But one need not believe in spacecraft to find value in the metaphor. What if the sky giants were real, but not alien in the way we imagine. What if they were simply others beings from another realm, another dimension, another forgotten branch of human potential? Perhaps all these theories contain grains of truth. Perhaps what we remember as giants from the sky are a symbolic echo of the awe felt when encountering knowledge far beyond one's understanding. A memory encoded in myth, not for accuracy, but for meaning. The monuments may not have been built by aliens or godlike beings, but by humans guided, inspired, or awakened by an earlier wisdom. A wisdom we have since lost, buried beneath time, dogma, and dust. What matters is not which theory is true, but that the questions are still being asked. For in the act of asking, we awaken something ancient in ourselves, a thirst for meaning, a yearning for origin, and sometimes the mystery itself is the answer. The silence is not absence, but invitation. They stand still, these monuments, towering, unmoved, ageless. Their stones bear no voice, and yet they speak. Not in the language of textbooks or certainty, but in the subtle dialect of mystery, the kind that seeps into the soul when night falls and the stars return to their places in the sky. We have traveled across deserts, climbed through jungles, stood at the feet of giants, stone and story alike. We have traced the outlines of myths that span continents, listened to tales told in temple carvings and in the whispered memory of ruins. And what have we found? No final answers, no key to unlock every door, but perhaps something deeper, a question that has followed us like a shadow, as old as curiosity itself. Who were we before we remembered how to forget? The legends of sky giants may never be proven nor disproven. They may be literal or allegorical. They may speak of beings from another world or of a human past so distant and extraordinary that it feels alien to us now. They may be stories, or they may be echoes of truths too old to stand in the daylight without trembling. But in every version, there is a constant awe. Awe at the scale of creation. Awe at the silence of stone. Awe at the idea that someone once knew how to do what we can no longer explain. And awe at the fragile persistence of memory carried across millennia in song, in symbol, and in stone. Perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the mystery was the gift. Not the answer, but the invitation to seek it. Not the monument itself, but the wonder it stirs. Because what truly separates the ancient world from ours is not time, but imagination. They built with meaning we have yet to decode. They lived with myths we now call superstition. Yet those myths endure while empires have crumbled. And if giants did once walk among us, beings of knowledge or flesh gods or forgotten men, they left behind no signatures, only questions. Questions carved in limestone and granite. Questions that resist decay, not because they are true, but because they are needed. So we return to them again and again. We gaze upward at the stones. We walk among the ruins and feel for a moment very small, and yet somehow larger than we were, as if something old in us remembers. In the end, the sky giants may never descend again, or perhaps they never left. They remain in the monuments, in the myths, in the stars above, and the questions within, waiting not for discovery, but for wonder. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is enough. Long ago, in the golden heart of the Egyptian desert, where the wind has whispered across the same sands for thousands of years, a structure rose not merely of stone, but of silent intention. The Great Pyramid of Giza has watched empires rise and fall, its gaze fixed upon the horizon of time itself. While the modern world sees a monument to the dead, a triumph of ancient engineering, others glimpse something more elusive, something not dead at all, but sleeping. For among the whispers of those who have stood in its shadow or walked within its dark and echoing chambers comes a strange and persistent notion that this pyramid, this massive shape of stone and silence, may be more than it seems, that it may, in some subtle way, generate or conduct energy. Not the energy of machines and wires, but something older, something felt rather than measured, something forgotten. The tale begins not with modern science, but with quiet anomalies. People who enter the king's chamber sometimes report unusual sensations of warmth without source, or a tingling in the skin, or a strange heaviness in the air. Some describe an unnatural calm, or a clarity of mind that feels imposed from without. Then there are the stories, quiet repeated, but never explained, of objects placed within the pyramid behaving strangely. Milk that sours more slowly, fruit that dries rather than rots, razor blades that when left in the pyramid's central chamber become sharper rather than duller. Even seeds, it is said, sprout faster and grow stronger if stored for days inside its walls. These accounts have not emerged from temples or tombs, but from the fringes of experimental curiosity, tinkerers, seekers, and independent researchers drawn to the pyramid, not as historians, but as listeners. Among them was a Frenchman named Antoine Bovis, who in the early 20th century claimed that he had placed organic material inside a scale model of the Great Pyramid, carefully aligned to the cardinal directions, and found that the decay process seemed slowed. Though his experiments were never formally accepted by scientific bodies, the idea caught hold in the minds of others. Bovis believed the pyramid's geometry itself might focus or harness a kind of natural energy. In later decades, researchers and enthusiasts would build models of their own report similar effects and speculate endlessly on what unknown field might be involved. Some called it pyramid power. Others suggested magnetism resonance, or even the manipulation of subatomic vibrations. But the pyramid remained silent and gave no answer. Still, the strange evidence, if it can be called that, continued to gather. In 1979, a team of Soviet researchers claimed to detect unusual electromagnetic activity at certain points within the Great Pyramid. They found minor electrical charges and magnetic fields not present in surrounding structures or open desert air. Others, years later, using ground-penetrating radar and frequency-measuring devices, suggested that the pyramid's limestone casing and granite core might behave like a resonator, vibrating in response to certain natural frequencies. Some physicists, more cautious but curious, have proposed that the pyramid's shape could allow it to focus mechanical vibrations or amplify environmental energy in ways not yet fully understood. Yet for all this speculation, there is no consensus. The field of Egyptology holds to its position. The pyramid was a tomb. A grand one, yes. A marvel of labor and logistics. But a tomb nonetheless. built for Khufu or Cheops, depending on the tongue that names him. And yet, even in that certainty, cracks appear. Because no mummy was ever found inside, no treasure, no inscriptions declaring divine burial rites or hymns to the afterlife. The granite sarcophagus in the king's chamber sits empty, unadorned, massive, and curiously too large to have passed through the narrow corridors leading in. It was placed there, it seems, before the pyramid was built around it, a fact that suggests planning, intention, and perhaps a different purpose altogether. The materials themselves are curious. Much of the pyramid is built from limestone quarried locally, but within, in its deepest chambers, lies granite sourced from Aswan, over 500 miles to the south. Granite is not only heavier and more durable, it also has a high quartz content, known to exhibit piezoelectric properties, that is, it can generate electrical charge under mechanical stress. Could this have been known somehow to the builders? Or is it merely coincidence, a happy accident of available materials? No one can say. But the pyramid structure, its mass, its alignment, its materials begins to suggest more than aesthetic design. It begins to resemble, if not a machine, then at least a structure built with energetic consequences in mind. Then there is its internal climate. In the blazing heat of the Egyptian summer, where the sun scorches the stone, like fire on iron, the interior of the Great Pyramid remains cool, always mysteriously around 20 degrees Celsius. No airflow system is visible, no vents to the outside world, and yet it breathes, it maintains, as if its very design resists temperature fluctuation, an ancient form of climate control executed without wires, pipes, or technology. Some suggest the vast stone mass absorbs and disperses heat in such a way as to create thermal equilibrium. Others see in this a subtle proof that the builders were attuned not only to stone, but to the forces that move through it. The alignment is no less strange. The pyramid is oriented with extraordinary precision to the four cardinal directions, so precise, in fact, that even modern buildings with laser-guided instruments often fail to match it. The margin of error is less than 1/20th of a degree. How did a people with no known compasses, no GPS, no satellites achieve such alignment? Were they guided by the stars alone, and if so, how did they apply that knowledge with such architectural accuracy? The question is not merely about engineering. It is about intent. Why go to such lengths? Why embed mathematical constants like p and the golden ratio into its proportions? Why build a monument whose base is almost perfectly square, with sides differing by less than an inch? These are not the marks of mere labor. These are the marks of design. Precision, purpose, and perhaps, if one dares to imagine a purpose, we do not yet understand. The modern world is impatient with mystery. It prefers answers, measurements, proof. And in this, the pyramid is uncooperative. It does not perform on command. It offers no interface, no switch to flip. If it is a machine, then it is one long since powered down or powered by something we do not yet possess. If it was once active, what did it do? If it conducted energy, what kind and to what end? Healing, preservation, communication. These are questions asked not with certainty, but with wonder, because the pyramid does not confirm or deny. It simply stands and invites the question. Those who step within its stone embrace often speak of feeling different, not frightened, but quieted, humbled. It is not the kind of power that screams or shines. It is the kind that waits, the kind that listens. One does not walk through the pyramid as one walks through a building. One drifts. One becomes aware of breath, of heartbeat, of the space between thoughts. And perhaps that, too, is a kind of energy. To call the pyramid an energy generator is in the strictest sense unprovable. But to ignore the patterns, the stories, the anomalies, that is to close one's eyes. The ancient builders, whoever they were, built with a knowledge we have not fully reclaimed. Whether it was intuitive or mathematical, mystical or scientific, it lingers still in the stone, in the shape, in the silence. And if the pyramid does hold energy, it is not the kind that flows through wires. It is the kind that stirs the soul, that awakens memory, that reminds us the past is not dead, but dreaming. And so, the Great Pyramid remains not merely a monument, but a presence, a beacon not of light, but of possibility. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the winds of the Sahara have fallen still, and the stars gleam like ancient eyes, one may stand before it and feel something, something nameless, something alive, amid the boundless sands and silence of the Giza Plateau, where the Great Pyramid rises like a frozen note in a song long forgotten. There lies a quiet but haunting mystery, one that doesn't involve what we see, but what we do not. For all its grandeur, for all its overwhelming complexity and flawless symmetry, the Great Pyramid of Giza comes to us without a whisper of instruction. No blueprints, no plans, no sketches or mock-ups, not even a primitive outline scratched onto a stone. This monument, so exact in its angles and so massive in its scale, was built with a level of foresight and engineering coordination that seems to defy the absence of documentation. And yet history remains silent on the matter. There is no workshop archive, no discarded models, no overseer's tablet describing angles or ratios. It simply appears. For a civilization as meticulous and record-keeping as the ancient Egyptians, this is not just odd, it is uncharacteristic. The same culture that chronicled daily harvests, funerary rituals, and personal letters in hieroglyphs and demotic scripts left behind not even a diagram for their greatest architectural triumph. We have inventories of livestock notes about grain rations, even complaints about labor conditions, but no drawing of the pyramid's interior plan, no calculations, no trial and error remnants. It is as though the knowledge came fully formed, executed not in iterations, but in completion. Like memory chiseled into the earth. One might expect that a project of such magnitude would involve trial models, practice runs, at least small-scale mock-ups to test structural ideas. Indeed, in most known ancient architectural endeavors, from Mesopotamian ziggurats to Greek temples, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of preparatory design, scaffolding, or incomplete earlier versions. But not here. Nowhere among the ruins around Giza or the wider Nile Valley has anything been discovered that could be called a prototype pyramid. What we do see are lesser pyramids, rougher, less precise, but they do not precede the Great Pyramid. They follow, which only deepens the enigma. Why does the most complex and perfect pyramid come first? It would be like discovering, that the very first airplane ever built was a Boeing 747, with no Wright brothers, no hang glider sketches, no missteps, only the final product soaring. This reversal of technological progression contradicts what we know of how human innovation usually unfolds slowly, messily, in layers of failure and refinement. And yet here we encounter something that seems to have skipped the process entirely. The Great Pyramid is not just large, it is surgically precise. It is aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree. Its base sides differ in length by less than an inch. Its massive stones interlock with such precision that even now it's difficult to slip a piece of paper between them, all without a single found schematic. No chalk lines, no etched plans, no wax tablets hidden in a builder's tomb. Was it oral transmission? Could the builders have carried such complex geometries and measurements purely in their minds from master to apprentice, year after year, generation after generation? If so, it would imply a mental discipline, an architectural tradition of almost supernatural rigor. One might even say it would require a kind of cultural memory no longer known to us, a way of seeing form, balance, and ratio, not through numbers on papyrus, but as instinct, as embodied wisdom. And what of the workers themselves? Many modern Egyptologists suggest that thousands of laborers constructed the pyramid over decades using simple tools, copper chisels, sledges, and sheer will. But such a vast human effort, coordinated, organized, sustained, would almost certainly leave behind traces of planning. Where are the journals of the foreman? Where are the training manuals, the measurement units? Where is the evidence of a learning curve? There have been fragments, bits of limestone with red ochre lines which some believe to be guide markings, and graffiti scrawled deep within the pyramid's interior, naming workers, crews, and divisions. But these are not plans. They are closer to signatures, to afterthoughts. They offer a glimpse of the human hand, yes, but not of the architectural mind behind the work. The pyramid's geometry, the golden ratios embedded in its proportions, the mathematical constants like pi and phi that appear in its design do not look like accidents of good guessing. They look like intent, like understanding, and yet the blueprint of that understanding is nowhere to be found. Some propose that the plans, if they existed, were simply drawn on perishable materials, wood, leather, papyrus that did not survive the centuries. Perhaps. But such a singular absence across such a monumental task strains belief. Others wonder if the design was never written down at all, but arrived as a whole, downloaded in a sense through inspiration, divine vision, or something even stranger. There are legends after all, stories of the pyramid being designed not by Egyptians, but by beings from the stars or remnants of a lost civilization before the Nile rose. These tales are not accepted by academic consensus, but they persist not because of what they claim, but because of what we lack. In the vacuum of explanation, story rushes in like breath. Still, the mystery here is not necessarily otherworldly. It may lie in the very nature of ancient knowledge, knowledge that was practical, embodied, lived, rather than abstract. Perhaps the master builders did not need to write plans because the plan was within them, passed down, not as diagrams, but as experience, song, movement. In the same way that a violin maker can shape a perfect curve by hand without measurement, because the hand remembers what the eye cannot see. But even if that were true, it would mean we are looking at a pinnacle of architectural intuition we do not currently understand. The pyramid becomes then not just a mystery of construction, but of cognition. It raises questions not only about how the ancients built, but how they thought. Did they experience space and form differently? Did they relate to the Earth's geometry, not through abstraction, but through sensation, alignment, presence? If so, their minds were tuned to a register we have since lost. A kind of knowing that is not about information, but about harmony. And so the Great Pyramid stands not merely as a tomb or a monument, but as an unsolved manuscript carved in stone, a creation of impossible coherence and missing origins. We study its weight, its angles, its shadows. We scan it with radar, model it in silicon crawl through its tunnels with robotics and light. But we do not find the plan, because perhaps in the end, there was no plan, not in the way we define it, only a moment in time when knowledge, purpose, and stone aligned. And perhaps that is the lesson, that not all genius leaves a paper trail. Some simply leaves wonder. Deep within the heart of the Great Pyramid of Giza, beyond the Grand Gallery and the narrow ascending shafts, lies the king's chamber, a room made of massive granite blocks, polished and stark, resting in solemn silence for over 4,000 years. At its center sits a single unadorned granite box. It is rectangular, heavy, and cracked at one corner, as though bearing the fatigue of eternity. And yet, for all the mystery that surrounds the pyramid, it is this seemingly simple object that provokes one of the strangest questions of all. For the box, often called a sarcophagus, does not fit through the passages that lead to it. The corridors that wind their way into the king's chamber are narrower than the box itself. Measured and modeled countless times, they make one fact very clear. The box was not brought in after the chamber was built. It had to be there before, which means, astonishingly, that the chamber, perhaps even the pyramid itself, was constructed around the box. That changes everything. In the realm of tomb construction, the norm is simple. Build the chamber, then place the coffin inside. But here we are asked to consider the reverse. To imagine a civilization placing an enormous, precisely carved granite vessel into a space that did not yet exist, into an emptiness that would later be enclosed in stone sealed by geometry. This sequence suggests intention far beyond what traditional interpretations allow. It means the builders had to design the entire structure around this singular object, accounting for its dimensions, its weight, and its fixed position before a single chamber block was laid. The granite box itself is made from a single block of Aswan granite, a stone that comes from quarries over 500 miles to the south. How it was transported to Giza, shaped with such clean internal angles and placed so deliberately in this central room, without the benefit of iron tools, modern machinery, or advanced optics, remains an open puzzle. The interior of the box is so smooth, its corners so precise, that some engineers have compared its finish to the output of mechanical boring tools which did not exist in the ancient world. Some corners are rounded in perfect curves, as if made not with a chisel, but with a spinning drill guided by steady, unseen hands. The box is uninscribed. It bears no cartouche, no hieroglyphs, no royal name. Unlike other sarcophagi found in Egypt's royal tombs, which overflow with inscriptions, prayers, and offerings to the gods, this one remains silent, as if it is older than writing, as if it predates the traditions it supposedly serves. Some scholars have speculated that it may have been intended as a symbolic vessel, not for a body, but for something else, a source of energy, a device, a placeholder for memory. And what of the damage to its corner? The crack is wide and deep, as though the box suffered some immense pressure or shock. Was it damaged during construction, during an earthquake, or as some fringe theorists propose, during an ancient technological event that we no longer understand? The room in which it sits, the king's chamber, is itself a marvel of harmonic proportions. Its granite walls, floor, and ceiling resonate with vibrational properties, and sound tests conducted within have revealed acoustic phenomena far beyond what would be expected from a simple burial chamber. If the box was indeed placed first and the chamber built around it, we must ask why such reverence. What made this object worthy of anchoring the pyramid's most sacred space? Was it simply a tomb prepared in advance for a dead king yet to arrive? Or was the king incidental, merely the name we gave to something much older, more universal, more enigmatic? Some have suggested that the granite box may be older than the pyramid itself, that it was preserved, repurposed, or inherited from an earlier civilization, one whose traces have vanished, save for this one relic embedded in geometry. In this view, the pyramid becomes not a tomb, but a shrine, a container built to protect the box, not the man. Still others lean into the functional mystery. Could the box have been part of a greater system, one tied to sound, resonance, or energy? In experiments conducted by acoustic engineers and fringe researchers alike, tones produced within the box or chamber are amplified and sustained in ways that hint at resonance tuning. Some claim that the box hums like a bell waiting to be struck, that it is not a coffin, but a chamber of frequency, not meant to hold flesh, but to channel vibration. The very dimensions of the box, when compared with the chamber, have been found to correspond to harmonic ratios suggesting an intentional relationship, not coincidental placement. And then there is the symbolic weight. In ancient Egyptian cosmology, the body was merely one part of a person's existence. The soul, the ka, required preservation, orientation, and passage. Perhaps the box was not a tomb, but a portal, a threshold between planes. If so, then its central position becomes even more significant. It is not hidden, not buried beneath layers of secrecy. It is placed in the center, beneath the tallest point of the pyramid, at the intersection of geometry and stillness. We are left, as always, with more questions than answers. The box is there. It does not fit through the passages. It was placed with purpose. It does not carry a name. It does not speak. And yet it remains. In a chamber of silence and stone, this granite vessel holds court. It watches the centuries pass through shadows and echoes. It whispers without words. And perhaps that is its final mystery, that in a place built for the dead, this object still waits, very much alive in its strangeness. For centuries, the Great Pyramid of Giza has stood as the definitive emblem of ancient Egypt, a monument to kingship, ambition, and eternity. It has long been accepted almost without question that this immense structure was a royal tomb constructed to house the remains of Pharaoh Khufu and to ensure his passage into the afterlife. That belief has been echoed in textbooks, echoed in museums, echoed in tour guides standing beneath the desert sun. And yet, when one steps into its depths, what greets them is not a chamber of death, but a silence that seems to defy definition. For all the grandeur of the pyramid, its interior tells a different story, one of absence. No mummy was found within the pyramid, no treasure, no funerary texts, no ornate sarcophagus, no inscriptions on the walls. The vast corridors and chambers, for all their architectural precision, are barren of the very things that define a tomb. Unlike the richly decorated tombs of the Valley of the Kings, where walls are alive with color and narrative, where gods and symbols swirl around the body of the deceased, here, in the most iconic structure of ancient Egypt, there is nothing. No story, no prayer, only stone. When explorers first breached its inner passages in antiquity, they found it empty. The king's chamber, cold and austere, held only the unmarked granite box. The queen's chamber, too, was void. Even the mysterious subterranean chamber, hollowed directly into bedrock, offered no indication of royal use. Some proposed that the contents had been looted. But if so, where were the remnants? Robbers do not take everything. They leave fragments, damaged signs of hasty intrusion. Here there were none. No broken pottery, no remnants of gold leaf, no bits of bone, just air and shadow. This absence has led some to suggest a troubling possibility that the pyramid may never have served as a tomb at all. If not a tomb, then what? That question has spawned 1,000 theories. Some propose it was a cenotaph, a symbolic monument to the king rather than his final resting place. Others see it as a temple, a center of ritual aligned with the stars and built for cosmic communion. Still others reach further into mystery, imagining it as an engine of transformation, not just spiritual, but energetic. A structure designed to do something, not merely to hold something. The pyramid's internal layout is curious. There is no clear path leading the soul, no painted corridor mimicking the duat, no progression from earthly chamber to divine throne. Instead, we find a strange symmetry. A descending passage leads deep underground to an unfinished chamber, cut but never adorned. Another passage rises steeply to the so-called Queen's Chamber, whose very name is a guess unanchored in evidence. Above that lies the Grand Gallery, an ascending hall so vast and strange that its purpose remains uncertain to this day. And beyond it, the King's Chamber, with its resonant granite walls and enigmatic box. Yet nothing here confirms the presence of the dead. If we imagine the pyramid as a tomb, it is an empty one. If we imagine it as a temple, it lacks the ornament. If we imagine it as a machine, we are left with a silence that offers neither confirmation nor denial. Even the hieroglyphic record outside the pyramid is quiet. The builders did not carve their names here. Khufu's cartouche appears only in hidden quarry marks, discovered deep within inaccessible chambers, marks that some question as later additions or misattributions. Why would the most ambitious builder in Egyptian history leave no clear monument to himself? Within his greatest work, this silence continues to challenge archaeologists and seekers alike. A civilization so meticulous, so invested in preparation for the afterlife, would not forget the essentials. They would not forget the Book of the Dead. They would not forget the heart scarab, or the offerings, or the protective amulets. The pyramid gives us none of these. Instead, it gives us proportions, alignments, resonance. It gives us math and stone. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the pyramid was never about the body. Perhaps it was about the soul, and not just the soul of one man, but of a people, a civilization, a planet, a monument not to death, but to time, to permanence. A message carved not in language, but in form. A signal that endures not through script, but through mass and mystery. Or perhaps it is something else entirely. A puzzle built to last longer than its solution. A monument to something forgotten. A structure built not for us, but for the stars. Its chambers may have once echoed with chant or silence or something in between. We may never know. And maybe that is the point too. Beneath the scorching Egyptian sun, the Great Pyramid of Giza looms timelessly, its weathered stones absorbing centuries like pages in a silent book. Yet not all of its secrets are visible to the eye. Some are locked deep within the stone itself, within the very matter of its walls and chambers. In recent decades, researchers armed with tools far beyond the dreams of ancient architects have begun to detect unusual properties in the stones of the pyramid, properties that are neither ornamental nor decorative, but physical, measurable, and strange. Among the most intriguing of these are the pyramid's magnetic anomalies. In certain zones within the Great Pyramid, particularly within the King's Chamber and along parts of the Grand Gallery, compass needles behave unpredictably. Sensitive instruments record subtle shifts in magnetic fields, small but consistent, not enough to disrupt a satellite or move a metal object, but just enough to raise a question. Why would such a structure made largely of limestone and granite affect the Earth's magnetic field at all? Can it, after all, is not simply a pretty stone. It contains high concentrations of quartz and small traces of radioactive elements, particularly uranium, thorium, and potassium-40. These elements decay naturally, releasing tiny amounts of energy in the process. This is not unusual in geological terms, but when concentrated in a confined resonant space like the King's Chamber, the implications become more interesting. Geophysicists and engineers who have studied the chamber note that its walls, ceiling, and floor, all made of pink Aswan granite, are precisely aligned and symmetrically constructed, creating a near-perfect acoustic cavity. The granite's crystalline structure allows it to resonate under certain frequencies, and some speculate that when coupled with natural electromagnetic activity, or even solar radiation, it may behave in unexpected ways. The chamber becomes not just a room, but a resonator, a receiver, or even a transmitter. Tests with sensitive electromagnetic equipment have revealed bursts of energy at specific times of day, often corresponding with solar positioning. While mainstream archaeology cautions against drawing premature conclusions, the data itself is clear. The pyramid is not entirely passive. Its stones interact with the environment. They hold, reflect, and perhaps even amplify natural forces. Then there is the matter of radioactivity. While the levels of radiation within the pyramid are not dangerous to human certain zones again, especially within the king's chamber, register slightly elevated background readings compared to the surrounding desert. This has led some fringe researchers to speculate wildly. Could the pyramid have harnessed some unknown form of ancient energy? Was it constructed to collect or store power? Not metaphorical power, but literal energy, radiating silently through the stone? These ideas seem fantastical at first, and yet they gain a peculiar weight when paired with the pyramid's other design choices. The air shafts that lead from the chamber to the exterior are angled precisely aligned with certain stars. But could they also have served as conduits not just for spirit, but for light or resonance or pressure? Could the pyramid have functioned as a kind of earth-bound antenna, receiving energy from the heavens and channeling it through a structure composed specifically of magnetic and radioactive material? Some theorists go further. They point to experiments where granite blocks, when exposed to vibration, generate piezoelectric effects. That is, electrical charges created through mechanical stress on crystalline structures. Could the constant compression of millions of tons of stone have created subtle energy within the pyramid's core? Was this intentional, or simply an incidental property of the material later mythologized into ritual? Mainstream science has yet to confirm such claims. Most of the anomalies fall within the bounds of natural variation. But when one considers the consistency of the materials used, the choice of Aswan granite hauled from hundreds of miles away, one is tempted to ask, why go to such lengths? Why this stone and not another? Why this alignment and not randomness? Even in the construction itself, one finds patterns that hint at hidden knowledge. The granite beams above the king's chamber, stacked in tiers to relieve pressure, were placed with extraordinary care. They distribute weight not just efficiently, but elegantly, almost as if the builders understood how to tune mass itself, like the strings of a colossal instrument. Combined with the mineral composition of the stone, the chamber becomes a convergence point of geology, architecture, and perhaps intention. To some, these are mere coincidences, echoes of pragmatic engineering, elevated by hindsight. But to others, they are whispers of a forgotten science, one that saw no boundary between spirit and matter, between heaven and earth. A science that viewed the pyramid not just as a structure of stone, but as a living body constructed with purpose to harness unseen forces flowing beneath our feet and above our heads. In this light, the pyramid's silence becomes louder than words. Its granite heart, pulsing with ancient energy, remains one of the greatest mysteries ever carved by human hands. Not simply because we do not know what it means, but because we do not even know how to begin asking. In the sweltering heat of the Egyptian plateau, where the midday sun scorches the stones and the breath of the desert itself feels like fire, there stands a monument that defies not only time, but the very elements it was born into. The Great Pyramid of Giza, exposed to millennia of sun, sand, and wind, remains outwardly battered, yet within its core it keeps a secret. Step inside, and the world outside falls away. The temperature drops, and it stays there. For all its vastness, for all the tonnage of limestone and granite that form its colossal body, the pyramid maintains an internal temperature of approximately 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Stable, calm, as if it has its own climate untouched by the inferno that rages just beyond its thick walls. In this place, the air does not shift with the seasons. It holds, quietly, predictably, almost unnaturally. Engineers and architects who have studied the structure propose that this is a natural result of the pyramid's mass and insulation. Thick stone walls, aligned with precision, devoid of windows, absorb and release heat, slowly acting as a thermal regulator. It's a principle known in modern architecture as thermal inertia, the ability of a material to resist changes in temperature. By this logic, the pyramid is merely a passive structure behaving as expected, and yet the perfection of it draws attention. Not all ancient stone buildings exhibit this stability. Not all structures of similar size or even greater mass are able to buffer the surrounding environment so thoroughly. Temples elsewhere in Egypt shift with the seasons. Tombs fluctuate, but the Great Pyramid remains. The constancy is uncanny. Some theorists point to the orientation of the structure. Each side is nearly perfectly aligned with the cardinal points north, south, east, and west. This precision, coupled with the pyramid's tapered geometry, creates a balance of shadow and light exposure and shelter. Airflows are limited yet deliberate. The internal corridors are narrow yet not stifling. There are shafts that reach outward, neither windows nor true ventilation systems, but something in between. Could they serve a function we don't yet understand? Could the builders have known how to regulate airflow and thermal exchange in ways that modern science only recently rediscovered? Others suggest that the location of the pyramid plays a role, that the builders selected the Giza Plateau not just for its elevation, but for its geophysical characteristics. Beneath the limestone crust lies a bed of granite laced with fissures and aquifers. Water, ever present beneath the surface, may play a hidden part in the pyramid's behavior, subtly influencing temperature or humidity through channels long buried and forgotten. But beyond technical explanations lies a deeper mystery: the why. Why would a tomb need to regulate its temperature? What purpose does this internal harmony serve, if its only resident was meant to be a deceased king entombed in silence and shadow? The pyramid has no treasures, no murals, no funerary inscriptions, only chambers, shafts, and silence. Its heart is still, yet it is alive in another way. It breathes a steady breath, warm, but never hot, cool, but never cold, like a machine in sleep mode, waiting, preserved. The question lingers in the air, like the pyramid's own chill. Was this temperature control accidental, or was it engineered? And if it was deliberate, to what end? There are whispers in fringe circles of preservation chambers, of long-term energy, stabilization, of resonance and acoustics. They speak of a structure not designed for death, but for stasis, for containment, for something that required equilibrium over centuries. A technology of climate, not of comfort. Even the choice of materials supports the mystery. Limestone insulates, granite stores, and releases heat with remarkable efficiency. Each layer of stone, each angle, each sealed passage contributes to a balance that has outlasted dynasties and disasters. Some researchers marvel at how close the pyramid's internal temperature is to the average human comfort zone. Was this a coincidence or a signature? And then there's the metaphor, the image that lingers long after the visitor has left the cool stone corridors. A massive structure fixed in the center of an unforgiving desert, keeping its heart steady, never fluctuating, never cracking, never surrendering to the sun, like the memory of something older than the pharaohs, like a secret meant to endure undisturbed. The Great Pyramid does not speak, but through its stillness, it suggests design. Through its silence, it implies intention. And in the gentle, unwavering breath of its chambers, one hears the echo of a purpose we have not yet named. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is everything. There are numbers that seem to lie at the very foundation of the universe. Numbers that appear not because we invent them, but because we discover them, already inscribed in the bones of reality itself. Among these few are as mysterious and as constant as pi and the golden ratio. They govern the movement of the stars, the shape of seashells, the petals of a flower, the spiral of galaxies. They are truths not written by humans, but found in the structure of things as they are. And somehow, they are also found in the Great Pyramid of Giza, not drawn on its walls, not recorded in scrolls or scripts, but woven silently and precisely into its very design. For generations, scholars, engineers, and dreamers have measured the pyramid's proportions, ran calculations, and tried to decipher what secrets might have been hidden in plain sight. And what they found was unsettling in its precision. The ratio of the pyramid's base to its height, when multiplied by two approximates pi, its slope defined by the angle of its faces, generates the golden ratio phi. Its perimeter reflects the circumference of a circle whose radius is the height of the structure. Its layout is not merely aesthetic or functional, but mathematical. The shape itself is an equation. How could such constants ones considered the pinnacle of Greek discovery thousands of years later appear encoded in a monument from the Old Kingdom of Egypt? Mainstream archaeologists are cautious. They point out that ancient builders likely did not understand pi as a formal mathematical constant, at least not as we do today. What we call pi may have emerged from an attempt to design stable, beautiful, or symbolically significant structures. Perhaps the builders simply followed proportions that worked, ratios that felt harmonious, that balanced structure and spirit. In this view, the presence of these constants is coincidental, the outcome of trial tradition and aesthetics, not design, not intention. But even this explanation strains under the weight of the pyramid's precision. The sides of its base differ by mere inches. The angles are calculated to a margin of error so slim it shames many modern buildings. If chance alone produced these patterns, then it was a chance that wore the mask of understanding. And the pyramid does not contain only one mathematical echo, it contains many. The speed of light, measured in meters per second, closely resembles the geographic coordinates of the pyramid's location. A coincidence? Perhaps, but curious nonetheless. The pyramid's mass orientation and dimensions have all been found to reflect complex ratios. Some even say the structure models the proportions of Earth itself, the curvature, the tilt, the distance from equator to pole. A scale model of the planet, rendered in stone. This, of course, invites speculation. Could the builders have possessed a form of knowledge we no longer recognize? Not necessarily alien or magical, but deeply empirical, earned through observation, preserved in oral traditions, passed down through priesthoods and initiates. Could the ancient Egyptians have known more about mathematics, astronomy, and geodesy than we give them credit for? Or could they have inherited it? A few researchers, marginalized by academia but persistent in their claims, argue that the pyramid's design is not original at all, that it represents the preservation of an even older science, one that predates Egypt, perhaps even predates known civilization, a remnant of a forgotten epoch where numbers were not just symbols, but sacred. Geometry was not merely a tool, but a language, a way to speak with the stars. And so the pyramid stands not just as a tomb, not just as a monument, but as a message. But to whom? To future builders, to distant ancestors, to the gods. Some see it as a harmonizer, tuned to the Earth's frequencies, resonating with planetary rhythms, guided by laws we have only begun to rediscover. Others view it as a kind of fossilized knowledge data, etched in form too vast to read in words, too precise to dismiss as chance. We still teach children about pi and phi. We draw circles and spirals. We model galaxies and atoms, buildings and bridges using the same ratios. We consider them modern truths. But perhaps the Great Pyramid whispers something older, that these constants were known before the chalkboard, before the abacus, before the scroll. They were felt in stone and left behind, as if the builders were not just trying to preserve a body, but to preserve a pattern, a truth, a memory, a mirror of the cosmos. And so we measure and wonder and measure again, because somewhere in the hush of ancient geometry, we sense the presence of a mind not our own, but familiar, one that understood that to carve a number into stone is to speak across millennia, and that a shape, if perfect enough, might one day awaken with meaning again. Among all the puzzles entombed within the Great Pyramid of Giza, few are as silent and as haunting as the absence of tools. For a monument of such immense size, weight, and precision, one might expect to find some trace of the instruments that brought it into being. Chisel marks, remnants of scaffolding, fragments of ropes, sleds, ramps, or perhaps even the workshops where thousands of workers prepared the parts for a feat that would tower over the desert for eternity. And yet, none of these have been found. Archaeological surveys around Giza have revealed fragments of copper chisels, primitive mallets, and stone pounders. These are real, tangible, and they paint a modest picture of ancient craftsmanship. But then the eye drifts upward to the smooth, interlocking limestone blocks, some weighing upwards of 70 tons. It follows the crisp, straight cuts in granite, a material that even modern diamond-tipped blades strain to shape. And suddenly, the chisels feel more like toys than tools. A contradiction begins to form in the sand. Copper as a metal is soft. It bends and dulls quickly against granite. Experimentation has shown that to shape even a single block of hard stone using such tools would take extraordinary time and effort, and yet the pyramid comprises over 2 million of them. The discrepancy is startling. How did a civilization with only rudimentary metals manage to construct something that demands engineering of the highest caliber? Mainstream Egyptology proposes that the bulk of the pyramid was built using limestone, which is far softer than granite and more workable with primitive tools. Granite used sparingly in internal chambers, like the king's chamber, may have been shaped with patience, manpower, and ingenuity, perhaps through abrasion, sand, and firecracking. And yet, the sheer scale challenges this assumption. Where are the half-finished blocks? The quarrying debris, the tools worn to nubs and discarded by the thousands. In the quarries of Aswan, where the red granite of the pyramid's inner sanctum originated, some clues do linger. The famous unfinished obelisk lies there, a colossal monolith left attached to bedrock, cracked, before it could be removed. On its surface, archaeologists point to marks they say resemble pounding with dolerite stones, but the method is exhausting, slow, and inconsistent. And it begs the question, was this really how tens of thousands of tons of granite were carved, shaped, and shipped? If so, why did the process leave so little behind? Some suggest that the tools were organic or biodegradable, ropes made of flax scaffolding, of palm trunks that disintegrated over time. Others believe the tools were recycled or removed. But such a vast industrial endeavor would have surely left a larger archaeological footprint, especially considering that the ancient Egyptians documented so many aspects of their lives, from the baking of bread to the embalming of the dead. Strangely, the building of their most iconic monument remains conspicuously absent from their records. This silence has opened the floodgates of speculation. Could the pyramid predate dynastic Egypt? Its true origins, forgotten by the time of the pharaohs, was it the work of a lost civilization? One whose tools, methods, and knowledge have vanished beneath the sands, leaving only the finished masterpiece behind? Or are we simply underestimating the creativity of ancient hands so adept at adapting the world around them that they made the impossible look effortless? Then there is the more radical suggestion that advanced technologies now lost or hidden were once known to humanity. Tools not of bronze or copper, but of vibration, sound, or energy. Technologies not unlike those hinted at in ancient texts from across the globe, tales of levitating stones of buildings summoned into place by command of voice or will, of knowledge gifted or inherited, not discovered. These ideas remain controversial, dismissed by many as pseudoscience or fantasy. Yet they persist not because they are proven, but because the evidence left behind is in its own way incomplete. The pyramid exists. It stands massive and precise, but its makers left no trace of the hands that carved it. In this way, the Great Pyramid is like a ghost of purpose. We see its body, but not its breath. We witness the outcome, but not the process. It is as though the very tools used to raise it were swallowed by time, or perhaps never existed in forms we would recognize. And so, the monument speaks without speaking, not in words or symbols, but through its impossible presence. A riddle in stone, whispering to those who dare to measure, to theorize, to imagine. What kind of civilization builds a legacy so vast yet leaves no memory of its making? The answer remains hidden, not buried beneath the sand, but between the stones. Somewhere between myth and memory, between scratched stone and the drifting stars, lies a whisper that echoes across ancient civilizations of beings not of this earth who came from the sky bearing knowledge, light, and power. These stories are not confined to one place or one people. They rise again and again from the dust of forgotten empires, from Sumer to Egypt, from the Andes to the Indus. Different tongues, different symbols, yet the same motif returns luminous visitors descending from above, bringing with them the gifts of wisdom, language, agriculture, or law. Are these merely metaphors, or are they echoes of a past we no longer understand? In the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, cradle of the world's first recorded stories, the Sumerians spoke of the Anuna deities who came from the heavens to shape the destinies of men. Unlike later gods of the classical pantheon, the Anuna were not born of earth. They descended in shimmering splendor from the sky. They organized humanity, taught kings how to rule, and even governed vast cities themselves. Their king Anu bore the title Lord of the Great Above. Their scribes inscribed tales of these visitors on clay tablets, stories of descent, judgment, and divine instruction. One such figure, Enki, is said to have given mankind the arts of civilization, brick-making, law writing, and irrigation. He came not to punish, but to guide. In the epic of Atrahasis, the gods themselves toil to create order, from chaos fashioning humanity to carry the burden of labor. But what stands out is the language sky descent instruction, consistent motifs across tablets older than the pyramids. Travel westward along the sands and riverbanks of Egypt, and we find similar echoes. The sky was not just a canopy. It was the realm of the gods, the great unknown from which life once emerged. The pyramid texts, among the oldest religious writings known to man, are inscribed in the 5th and 6th dynasty tombs and speak of the pharaoh's ascension, not metaphorical, but literal. The king is lifted into the sky, where he is greeted by celestial beings nourished by the stars and transformed into an eternal presence among them. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, is often linked with Orion. Isis, with the star Sirius. The alignment of the pyramids to Orion's belt is not merely aesthetic. It is symbolic, purposeful, a cosmic doorway through which the soul might travel. In the Book of the Dead, a recurring passage entreats the stars to guide the deceased. May you rise on the wings of the sky-faring ones. These are not abstractions. They are ritual invocations. The sky was not empty. It was inhabited. In the Americas, the story repeats though separated by oceans and centuries. The Hopi people of the American Southwest speak of the Kachinas, spiritual beings who descended from the heavens in flying shields to teach agriculture and social harmony. The Maya carved stelae depicting figures with elaborate helmets and antennae, seated atop what look at least to modern eyes like control panels. In Peru, the Nazca etched massive unexplained lines into the earth, some shaped like birds, monkeys, or insects, but others, straight as arrows, stretch for kilometers across the desert, only visible from the air. Who were these skywatchers? The Andean legends reference. Why do their temples align so perfectly with the solstices and the stars? India's ancient epics, too, swirl with stories of sky beings and impossible machines. The Mahabharata and the Ramayana describe Vimanas, flying chariots wielded by the gods, capable of traversing great distances and even waging war from the sky. These were not poetic abstractions, but described with remarkable specificity, powered by fire mercury or sound, some spinning like whirlwinds. others with wings of metal. One passage speaks of a weapon unleashed from the sky that made the sun turn crimson and the earth tremble. To some, it is metaphor. To others, it hints at forgotten technologies. Skeptics argue that these are simply allegories, and perhaps they are. Humanity has always looked upward for answers, and myth provides a canvas upon which awe and fear can be painted. But the similarities are difficult to ignore. Different continents, unconnected by trade or language, telling stories with overlapping details. Not just sky gods, but sky visitors who descend, interact, teach, then leave, often promising to return. In Dogon, mythology passed down orally in Mali. For generations, there is the tale of Namo, an amphibious being who came from the star Sirius B, invisible to the naked eye and unknown to modern astronomy until the mid-19th century. Yet the Dogon not only knew of its existence, they described its orbit and characteristics with uncanny precision. Scholars debate the origin of this knowledge. Was it simply coincidence, or did the Dogon preserve a memory handed down from an ancient contact? Could myth sometimes be history encrypted in metaphor? Then there is the enigmatic figure of Viracocha, the great teacher god of the Andes. He appeared, say the Inca, after a time of chaos and flood walking among the people, tall and bearded, clad in white robes. He taught them agriculture arts and ethics before vanishing across the sea, promising to return. When the Spanish arrived centuries later, the Inca mistook them for his prophesied return. The likeness was not just physical, it was cosmic. In Polynesian myth, the god Tiki also comes from the stars to breathe life into the first humans. In Zulu legend, the sky people are said to have harvested minerals from Earth before returning to the stars, leaving behind bloodlines that walk among us still. Could all of these be independently developed symbols of higher consciousness? Archetypes of divine guidance shaped by humanity's longing to transcend the terrestrial ore. Could they reflect an ancient reality lost to time, one in which Earth was not as isolated as we believe? Modern theorists, often labeled fringe or speculative, point to the convergence of these accounts as evidence of paleo contact. They suggest that early humanity may have been visited by an advanced civilization, perhaps not extraterrestrial in the modern sense, but certainly skyborne in relation to primitive cultures. Such a civilization, vastly superior in technology, might easily be mistaken for gods. Their machines would seem miraculous, their presence divine. They may have come not to conquer, but to uplift, guiding early humans toward agriculture, architecture, and order. And when their work was done, they departed, leaving behind memories, myths, and monuments. Could this be why so many ancient structures point not to the gods of Earth, but to the constellations? Yet mainstream archaeology warns against such conclusions. The absence of physical evidence makes such theories speculative at best. Oral traditions are fluid metaphors evolve, and the human mind is capable of crafting wonders without divine instruction. Still, the mystery remains. Not in the presence of evidence, but in the consistency of these tales scattered across the world like breadcrumbs, pointing to something we no longer understand. What does it mean that civilizations with no contact told the same story? That their gods descended, taught, and vanished, leaving humanity changed? Could myth be the faint echo of an event so transformative that it splintered into thousands of cultural memories, all bearing the same shape. There is no final answer. But perhaps, in the silence between the lines of these texts there, lies a shared human truth that we are not alone, that we were never alone, that once long ago, someone or something reached out from the stars and found us waiting, gazing upward. And now, as our own machines stretch toward the edge of the solar system, as our eyes search for exoplanets and distant suns, we find ourselves echoing the same questions the ancients once did. Who are we? Where did we come from? And who was here before the sky has always beckoned? Not just with stars, but with stories. Not just with silence, but with memory. And in the constellations above, perhaps we are not just looking outward, but homeward. There is a shape, simple, ancient, enduring, that appears across continents, across millennia, across civilizations, that according to what we know, should never have known one another. It rises from the jungles, the deserts, the mountains, and the mist of forgotten valleys. It is the pyramid. Not just the famous ones, those of Giza, Chichen Itza, or Saqqara, but hundreds, even thousands more. Some half buried in forested hills, others quietly eroding under centuries of snow and wind. They share no language, no shared script, or common religion. And yet, they all chose the same shape, a triangle rising to the heavens. Why? The pyramid is not just a structure, it is a mystery encoded in stone. In Egypt, it served as a tomb, a gateway to eternity, an ascension ladder for the pharaoh to join the stars. In Mesoamerica, it was the stage for rituals for blood, for calendars carved in stone that tracked the heavens with uncanny precision. In Sudan, the Nubian pyramids stand thinner and taller, dozens rising in formation from the Golden Sands monuments to forgotten kings whose names echo only in fractured glyphs. In China, massive mounds, once white and gleaming, dot the landscape near Xi'an, surrounded by silence and secrecy, some still forbidden to be excavated. Then there are the unexpected ones. In Indonesia, the terraced pyramid of Gunung Padang, hidden beneath layers of volcanic soil, is potentially older than any known structure on Earth. Ground-penetrating radar suggests multiple layers, each older than the last, going back not thousands, but tens of thousands of years. In Bosnia, a controversial site at Visoko reveals a mountain shaped too perfectly to be natural. Whether truly man-made or not, its tunnels, stone blocks, and alignments have sparked debate, drawing researchers and pilgrims alike to its shadow. In the Americas, from the stepped pyramids of the Olmecs to the flat-top mounds of Cahokia in modern Illinois, the shape reappears modified, adapted, but unmistakable. It raises a question too uncomfortable for most textbooks. How did so many cultures, separated by oceans and time, build the same form? The official explanation is elegant in its simplicity. The pyramid is structurally sound. It is the most stable shape for stacking stones, distributing weight, and reaching upward. Gravity, after all, is universal. The pyramid allows builders to go higher with less material without the need for arches or beams. Perhaps the reason is purely practical. But is that all? Because beneath the practicality lies something else, something older than engineering. The pyramid is not just strong, it is symbolic. It points upward toward the heavens, toward the divine. In almost every case, pyramids are associated with the sacred. with gods, stars, ancestors, with ascension, resurrection, and light. In Egypt, the pyramids were aligned precisely with Orion's belt, and the cardinal directions so precise that modern surveyors marvel at their accuracy. In Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is aligned with the setting sun on specific days of the year, its sides mapping the cosmos. In Cambodia, the temple pyramid of Koker is tilted 14 degrees off cardinal north, not by accident, but to align with the rising of the star Sirius. Were these merely ornamental alignments, or were they part of a knowledge now lost? The ancient builders were not naive. They were astronomers, architects, engineers, and philosophers. They tracked solstices and equinoxes, mapped the heavens long before telescopes. Many of the world's pyramids seem not only to mirror the sky, but to act as instruments of time, of ceremony, of something more. In the Yucatan, at Chichen Itza, the pyramid of Kukulkan casts a serpent-shaped shadow only during the equinoxes. In Peru, at Machu Picchu, the Intihuatana stone, the hitching post of the sun, marks the solar zenith with eerie precision. These are not coincidences, they are messages in geometry. But messages to whom some suggest that the global pyramid phenomenon is evidence not of independent invention, but of a shared legacy. A lost civilization, ancient and widespread, that seeded its knowledge before the flood of time swept it away. Plato spoke of Atlantis, a great civilization that fell beneath the sea. The Mahabharata hints at distant ages when gods and men walked together, when great cities were consumed in fire and vanished from memory. Could the pyramids be remnants of such a forgotten past, not built by gods, but by their students? Others propose a more cosmic origin. That ancient people, inspired by visitors from the stars, built these structures in imitation of their ships, their homes, or their teachings. Theories of ancient astronauts have long been dismissed by mainstream scholars, but they persist not because of proof, but because of pattern. The same stories, the same forms, the same skyward longing. Is it so impossible to imagine that someone once came taught and left behind blueprints in stone? Yet perhaps the answer lies not in lost civilizations or alien visitors, but in ourselves. Perhaps the pyramid is a shape we are drawn to instinctively. It represents order, hierarchy, stability. From the bottom rises complexity, converging toward unity. It mirrors the social order of ancient times, peasants at the base, priests above them, and the king, the divine, at the apex. It reflects mountains, ziggurats, the stepped climb toward the spiritual. Maybe we built pyramids not because someone told us to, but because something in us remembered the stars. But still, the coincidences multiply. Why did the Egyptian pyramids suddenly appear at full scale with no clear architectural evolution? Why are their internal chambers aligned to celestial targets with such exactness? Why do the pyramids of Mesoamerica show mathematical knowledge rivaling that of the Greeks? Why does Gunung Padang predate known agriculture? And why do so many of these monuments contain elements not yet fully explained: magnetic anomalies, quartz inclusions, acoustic resonances, and unexplored chambers? In modern times, we've only begun to scratch the surface. New LiDAR scans revealed jungle-covered pyramids in Guatemala, Honduras, and Brazil, entire cities swallowed by trees. Satellites detect strange patterns beneath the sand in Egypt and Sudan. Underground tunnels, chambers, and sealed passages remain undisturbed waiting. Some cultures even speak of the pyramids being far older than archaeologists believe, that they were not built once, but rebuilt, restored, echoes of an even earlier past. So we are left once again in the in-between, between knowledge and mystery, between stone and star. The pyramid, whether in the Nile's shadow or the Andean highlands, continues to rise, not just in the landscape, but in our imaginations. It is a symbol too persistent to ignore, too widespread to dismiss, and too precise to explain away entirely. We do not yet know its full story, but perhaps in the end, the pyramids were never meant to be understood by the mind alone. Perhaps they were meant to be felt, to be climbed not just by feet, but by spirit. We build pyramids, still not in stone, but in memory, in skyscrapers that rise to pierce the clouds, in algorithms and hierarchies, in stories we tell about where we came from, and always they point upward because we still look up, still wonder, still listen, and perhaps far beyond the edge of what we remember, someone is listening back. Beneath our feet lies a world we barely understand, a realm not of myth, but of stone, not of fantasy, but of forgotten hands. We walk above it daily on pavement soil, and stone never suspecting that far below, ancient architects carved out vast and silent cities, labyrinthine networks, and underground sanctuaries whose purposes remain shrouded in mystery. These are not the cellars or catacombs of recent history, nor the mines of industry. These are entire cities deep beneath the surface, built with such skill, precision, and ambition that they defy everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations. In the heart of modern-day Turkey, beneath the dusty hills of Cappadocia, lies a hidden marvel, Derinkuyu, discovered accidentally in the 1960s when a man knocked down a wall in his basement. The city revealed itself layer by layer. Not a tunnel, not a bunker, but an entire subterranean metropolis. It descends at least 18 stories underground and once housed an estimated 20,000 people. There were kitchens and chapels, schools and wineries, wells and ventilation shafts so sophisticated that fresh air could still be drawn from the surface hundreds of feet above. The city was protected by massive stone doors that rolled shut from within, impossible to open from the outside. Who built it? And why mainstream archaeology suggests the Phrygians later expanded by early Christians fleeing persecution. But no definitive answer exists. The stone-cutting techniques, the architectural foresight, the sheer scale of the endeavor, it all points to a level of engineering rarely credited to ancient peoples, especially when working without iron tools or electric light. And Derinkuyu is not alone. Dozens of underground cities have been discovered across the region Kaymakla Uzkonak, and more, each connected by hidden tunnels stretching miles beneath the earth. Some even whisper of deeper levels long collapsed or sealed, hinting at a depth of planning and purpose we have only begun to fathom. But the mystery stretches far beyond Anatolia. In the Andes of Peru and Bolivia, legends speak of chincanas, ancient tunnels said to stretch for miles beneath the mountains, linking sacred sites across the landscape. Spanish conquistadors searched for these tunnels, and some were never seen again. In the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, near Cusco, there are sealed entrances leading into the earth. Local stories tell of children and soldiers who ventured inside only to vanish. Those who returned spoke of endless passages, stone stairways descending into darkness and chambers with no clear end. Were these escape routes, sacred pathways, or something far older? In Ecuador, Father Crespi, a Jesuit priest, was shown a strange metallic library said to lie in caverns beneath the jungle, a collection of golden tablets etched with unknown symbols. The so-called Taos Caves remain a subject of debate and controversy, especially after astronaut Neil Armstrong personally joined an expedition to explore them in 1976. Why would one of the first men to walk on the moon be interested in underground ruins deep in South America? The answer remains elusive. In Egypt, beneath the sands of Giza, whispers of subterranean chambers persist. Not just the known tunnels beneath the Sphinx or the shafts within the pyramids, but vast sealed-off systems never fully explored. Ancient texts speak of a hall of records, a mythical archive of humanity's lost knowledge, hidden beneath the paws of the Sphinx. The official narrative dismisses these tales as legend, but in 1993, ground-penetrating radar detected anomalous cavities beneath the Sphinx's enclosure. To this day, many of them remain unexcavated, unexplained, untouched. India has its own secrets. In Ellora, a temple complex carved directly into solid basalt rock, the Kailasa temple defies explanation. It was not built stone by stone, it was excavated, hollowed out from the top down, removing an estimated 200,000 tons of stone with unknown methods. And beneath it, tunnels and chambers stretch into the hillside, some sealed, others leading to dead ends. The site hints at an ancient mastery of both architecture and subterranean design. Was this a temple or a gateway? All across the world, from Malta to Mongolia, from Scotland to Siberia, we find remnants of an underground past. In the Orkney Islands, stone structures lie buried beneath earth mounds, connected by passageways that suggest communal living spaces underground. In the American Midwest, the mound builders left behind not only raised earthworks, but accounts recorded by early settlers of vaults beneath them lined with stone, filled with artifacts now lost. In China, mysterious dragon holes plunge into the earth, some natural, some not. In the Himalayas, Tibetan texts speak of a subterranean realm called Agartha, a world beneath ours inhabited by enlightened beings, hidden from the surface by time and secrecy. The idea of a world beneath our world is not new. It echoes in the myths of every culture. In Greek lore, Hades ruled the underworld, a mirror of the living world, but deeper, darker. The Norse spoke of Svartalfheim, a land beneath Midgard home to dwarves and ancient wisdom. The Hopi people of North America tell of their ancestors emerging from underground worlds after cycles of destruction above. Even Christianity and Islam include tales of hidden realms, caves of sleep, vaults of punishment or sanctuary. Is it all just symbolic? Or is there a deeper truth? What if ancient civilizations sought shelter not just from war or persecution, but from something greater, the last ice age. Around 12,000 years ago, ended in a global cataclysm, rising seas, sudden climate shifts, perhaps even cometary impacts. If a people had foreknowledge or memory of such events, would they not turn to the safest place possible, underground? It would explain why so many subterranean structures seem overbuilt, over-engineered, designed not just for living, but for surviving. And it might explain why their builders left so little trace on the surface. We think of the past as visible ruins, temples, artifacts. But what if the real story lies below, hidden, not by time, but by stone, not by decay, but by design? A deliberate erasure, a choice to go beneath, to hide, to endure. Modern technology, radar, lidar, thermal imaging, is only now beginning to peel back the layers. Discoveries long buried are re-emerging. Networks of tunnels beneath pyramids, vaults beneath mountains. The secrets are there, waiting, silent. And perhaps the strangest part of all is this: we are still drawn to the underground. We build subways, bunkers, data centers buried in mountains. We dream of bases on the moon, on Mars, dug into alien soil. Maybe the instinct is older than we know. Maybe we're just following footsteps laid down long ago. So next time you walk across a quiet field, or stare into a cave's dark mouth, or descend into a cellar that seems deeper than it should be, pause. Listen. The earth remembers, and in its depths it holds secrets we've only begun to rediscover. Beneath our feet, a second history waits. Beneath the crushing weight of millions of stone blocks, sealed in silence for more than 4,000 years, lies a labyrinth of stone that defies understanding. Within the Great Pyramid of Giza, monument of eternity, sentinel of desert time, there exists not merely chambers and shafts, but a strange architecture of intention, one that feels less like a tomb and more like a puzzle. As one steps out of the blinding Egyptian sun and into the cool hush of its interior, the air shifts. The echo of footsteps becomes muted, almost reverent, and the walls close in, not oppressively, but like a whispering presence. Here there are no murals like those found in the tombs of kings, no golden treasures to reflect flickering torchlight, no inscriptions praising the divine, only stone, endless, deliberate stone. Yet this absence is its own kind of message. It speaks not of emptiness, but of concealment. It invites not admiration, but contemplation. What is this place really, and who was it built for? The layout of the Great Pyramid is deceptively simple until you try to explain it. A descending passage leads down sharply into bedrock, terminating in a rough and unfinished cavity known simply as the subterranean chamber. Above that, hidden behind angled shafts and narrowing corridors, lies the queen's chamber, though no queen was ever found within. And highest of all, encased at the heart of the pyramid, like a stone within a jewel box, is the king's chamber, containing a single lidless granite box that some call a sarcophagus, though it has never held a body. Between these lie sloped shafts, abrupt voids, so-called relieving chambers, and passages whose function has never been conclusively identified. Some lead nowhere, Others point to stars. Some are too small for a person to crawl through, yet meticulously cut with geometric precision. These are not the wild spaces of improvisation. They are calculated, measured, and carved with effort that seems at times disproportionate to the result. Why the deeper one moves into this architectural riddle, the stranger it becomes. One shaft appears to be aligned with Orion's belt during the pyramid's construction era, while another points toward the North Star. Are these celestial guideposts, ritual air ducts, symbols of something else entirely? The Queen's chamber, though centrally placed, appears unfinished. Salt crusts the walls in a way that suggests some chemical reaction or exposure long forgotten. Its small shafts were thought to be blind ends until robotic explorers discovered that they terminate in tiny stone doors, each with copper handles. Doors that lead nowhere yet were sealed with care. It is as if the pyramid is less a building and more a language one with syntax and metaphor, but no Rosetta Stone to decode it. And above the king's chamber, hidden for millennia, lie 5 small chambers, stacked atop each other. They were found not through exploration, but almost accidentally when a British explorer blasted his way upward in the early 19th century. These so-called relieving chambers are said to be structural, meant to divert weight away from the chamber below. And yet, each contains something unexpected: red ochre graffiti inscriptions in a workman's script, giving names of construction crews and pharaohs. It is the only writing in the entire pyramid. It is humble, almost crude, and entirely at odds with the precision of the architecture that surrounds it. And even here, doubt creeps in. Some scholars question the authenticity of the marks, suggesting they may have been forged. For in a structure so carefully crafted, so eerily silent of language, these accidental markings feel like a shout in a cathedral. Then there is the so-called Grand Gallery, a steep and vaulted passage nearly 9 meters high, its corbelled ceiling climbing toward the heart of the structure. It is magnificent and yet puzzling. Its purpose remains undefined, too grand for a corridor, too precise for storage. Some believe it was a ceremonial path. Others suggest mechanical function, perhaps even part of a resonance chamber, echoing sound or energy in ways we don't yet understand. For the walls here are not merely aligned, but tuned. Sound behaves strangely. A whisper lingers. A footstep carries. Those who have stood in its center describe a feeling not merely of awe, but of displacement, as though the pyramid, in some forgotten way, is listening. Recent scans using muon radiography have revealed more surprises: still large voids hidden above the grand gallery, invisible from within and unreachable by known corridors. They are not caves or natural formations. They are structured, purposeful, and utterly inaccessible. Why? Build a room no one can enter. Why encase emptiness with such precision? Some researchers call these voids thermal anomalies, while others whisper of unknown chambers, perhaps even a lost inner sanctum untouched since the age of Khufu. But the truth is, we don't know. Not yet, and perhaps not ever. For every theory, a counter-theory rises. Some say the pyramid is a tomb in disguise, its lack of decoration a reflection of royal austerity. Others suggest it was never meant to hold the dead, but rather to honor the stars to mirror Orion and serve as a ladder to the afterlife. A few bravers still propose it was a machine, an engine of unknown purpose, channeling forces we no longer measure. They point to the alignment, the geometry, the materials. They speak of piezoelectricity, of harmonic resonance, of water channels beneath the bedrock. They are dismissed by academics, and yet the questions persist. The Great Pyramid is not merely a relic, it is a structure of intentions. It is an argument made in stone left without explanation. Unlike other ancient works, which display their purpose openly, temples for worship, tombs for burial, cities for dwelling, the pyramid closes in on itself. It hides rather than reveals. It resists understanding. And that perhaps is the true heart of its mystery. Even today, as tourists shuffle through its narrow corridors, guided by electric torchlight and modern scaffolds, the feeling remains this place is not what it seems. It was never meant to be fully seen. It was built not to impress, but to endure. Not to explain, but to provoke. And in that, it succeeds beyond measure. For as science uncovers new scans and engineers propose new models, the question remains as old as the first breath of stone upon desert. What is this place, and who built it, not just with stone and skill, but with silence? It stands now, not as a monument, but as a riddle, not as a ruin, but as a whisper. And if we listen not with ears, but with patience, we may begin to hear not answers, but echoes. And in those echoes, the ancient world breathes still. Beneath the restless sprawl of modern Tehran, buried under the weight of glass towers, congested highways, and the rumble of the underground metro, there lies something older than empire and quieter than time. It is not marked on most maps, nor mentioned in many books, but whispered of by those who remember the old Zoroastrian families whose stories stretch back not centuries but millennia. They speak sometimes reluctantly of a fire that has burned uninterrupted for generations beneath the earth. Not metaphorically, but literally, a sacred flame tended in silence, hidden in a forgotten chamber beneath the feet of millions who walk the city above, unaware of what sleeps below. Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest known religions, long predates the rise of Islam and even the conquests of Alexander the Great. It flourished in the ancient lands of Persia, teaching a moral dualism of good and evil order and chaos embodied in the eternal struggle between Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of destruction. Central to Zoroastrian practice is the reverence for fire, not as an object of worship, but as a symbol of purity, truth, and the divine order of the universe. The fire is kept alive in temples tended by priests, its continuity considered a sacred trust. In times of peace, the fire blazed publicly, but in times of persecution, it moved underground, sometimes quite literally. There are legends among Iran's Zoroastrian communities that during the early Islamic conquests, when temples were burned and altars destroyed, a small group of priests carried the eternal flame of a grand fire temple, perhaps the one in Ray or Yazd, or an even older, forgotten sanctuary, to a safer place. That place, the story goes, lay beneath the ancient city that would one day become Tehran. They tunneled deep into the earth, perhaps into old water channels called qanats, and there built a secret temple, simple, silent, hidden. The fire was reignited, and it never went out. Decades passed, then centuries. Empires rose and fell. Dynasties shifted like desert winds. But the flame, it is said, endured, passed from elder to acolyte, from father to son, in rituals never written down. Few were allowed to see it. Fewer still were permitted to tend it. And though the city above transformed from Qajar palaces to Pahlavi boulevards to revolutionary slogans and satellite dishes, the temple below remained, forgotten by most, protected by time and silence. In the early 2000s, during the excavation of a new metro tunnel near the heart of Tehran, a group of workers allegedly broke through into a hollow cavity lined with ancient stone. What they found, according to unofficial accounts, was not a sewer nor a cistern, but a chamber unlike anything in the modern city. The walls were scorched with soot, yet intricately carved with fire motifs and inscriptions in Avestan, the old language of Zoroaster's hymns. At the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, blackened with use, and behind it a sealed passage blocked by rubble and time. The tunnel was quickly reinforced and closed. No official reports followed, but whispers began to spread among the workers, among old families, among the Zoroastrian community in Yazd, who suddenly received visitors from Tehran, bearing offerings and quiet questions. Had the temple been found? And if so, what would happen next? To this day, no government or religious authority has confirmed the discovery. The location remains unknown, perhaps deliberately obscured, perhaps lost once again beneath the shifting infrastructure of the capital. Some believe the chamber was quietly resealed to protect it. Others think it was cleared, studied, and archived, its contents now locked in museum basements or private vaults. A few even claim that the fire still burns somewhere in the bowels of the city, tended now not by priests, but by those who feel its call. What draws people so deeply to this story is not merely the possibility of an underground temple, but what it represents: continuity. In a world where nearly everything is impermanent buildings, borders, beliefs, the idea that a flame could survive for 2,000 years through invasion, oppression, and modernization strikes a chord deep in the human soul. It speaks of memory, of devotion, beyond convenience, of belief that refuses to be extinguished. Scholars debate whether such a fire could have lasted uninterrupted. They point out the logistical challenges, the fuel, the secrecy, the human effort required. They note the lack of archaeological confirmation. Yet these objections feel almost beside the point, because the story of the hidden temple, like so many of history's deepest mysteries, may not require proof to be true. Its truth lies in its endurance, in the fact that even now it is still told, quietly, carefully, as if the telling itself keeps something alive. And so we are left with a city built on centuries, under which may lie a chamber lit not by electricity or sun, but by something older. A light passed hand to hand in darkness and silence defying time. Whether or not the flame still burns is unknown, but the idea of it flickers on in the corners of memory, in the spaces between fact and legend. A fire in the dark, a temple beneath the city, a mystery waiting in the quiet below. In the silent heat of the Giza Plateau, where the desert wind whispers through grains of sand that have touched the feet of pharaohs, one monument rises above all else, not just in height or grandeur, but in defiance of time itself. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, standing resolutely for more than 500 years, does more than simply survive. It endures. Storms have battered it. Invasions have scarred it. Earthquakes have shaken the land beneath it. And yet this immense structure remains unmoved, unbowed. While lesser temples crumbled and statues fell into the dust, the pyramid's massive form continues to cast its long shadow at sunset, as if bound to the earth by some ancient forgotten power. What secret lies within the stones that allows them to resist not only the weight of the sky above, but the violent shifting of the earth below? In a land where earthquakes, though rare, can be devastating, where tremors have cracked open tombs and shaken the spines of cathedrals, it is nothing short of extraordinary that a building of such weight and height, composed of over 2 million blocks of stone, has stood virtually untouched by seismic upheaval. The question is not only how it was built, but why it was built to last like this so stubbornly, so unyieldingly across centuries that have consumed empires and erased entire languages. Modern engineers, architects, and geologists who examine the pyramid often do so with a quiet reverence, not just because of its age or scale, but because even now it refuses to fully reveal how its design has rendered it so resilient. There are no written records of the engineering principles used, no papyrus scrolls describing load distribution or seismic wave absorption. And yet the pyramid stands, its angles sharp, its core intact, as though it were immune to the laws that govern all man-made things. Its structural strength has fascinated scholars for generations. Could it be mere coincidence that the pyramid's geometry distributes weight so flawlessly that its base remains perfectly square, despite 4 millennia of geological tension? Or is there something else hidden in the limestone and granite, a forgotten wisdom perhaps etched into stone rather than script? The base itself spans over 13 acres, its four sides aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. But beyond precision, there's something deeper at play, a mastery of mass and balance that seems to anticipate not only the weight of the stones above, but the unpredictable quakes below. It is as though the pyramid is not resisting nature, but working with it, absorbing shock, channeling force, dispersing energy through a network of interlocking stones so intricately placed that not even a blade can fit between them. Some researchers have begun to suggest that the Great Pyramid operates much like a massive damper, a structure capable of minimizing vibrations and absorbing energy. Though built with no mortar in its core, the stones fit together with such uncanny closeness that they move slightly with the earth, not against it. In this way, the pyramid breathes, with the planet shifting, but not falling, leaning, but never toppling. And perhaps most curiously, the interior design may enhance this effect. The Grand Gallery, with its stepped ceiling, and the King's Chamber, with its layered granite roof beams, act not just as passageways and chambers, but as pressure regulators distributing force and tension away from weak points. The chamber above the King's Room, often dismissed as a simple relief space, may in fact serve as an architectural shock absorber, something no other ancient tomb required or possessed. Could this earthquake resistance have been intentional? If so, then the builders of the pyramid understood forces not officially described until the modern era. And if it was unintentional, then the coincidence is breathtaking, as if the hand of design was guided by instincts lost to the modern mind. Some geologists have suggested that the structure's resilience is due to its low center of gravity and sheer mass. After all, with each side sloping inward and with stone on stone stacked in layers that tighten under pressure, the pyramid behaves like a wedge pressed into the earth. The more the ground moves, the more tightly the blocks press into one another. Others speculate that the site itself was chosen for its stability. Perhaps the Giza Plateau is more geologically sound than other regions. But this too raises questions. How did they know? Did the ancient Egyptians possess some early form of geological surveying? Or was it observation intuition, something else? From a distance, the Great Pyramid seems simple, a triangle against the sky. But up close, it is a puzzle of weight, stress, tension, and equilibrium. No part of it seems accidental. The weight of each stone, the angle of each wall, the positioning of each chamber together, they form not just a monument, but a system, a living geometry whispering the language of balance. And this resilience is not abstract, it is proven. In 1303 CE, a powerful earthquake struck Egypt, devastating many structures in Cairo. Mosques fell, minarets shattered, even parts of the pyramid's outer casing stones were dislodged. Yet the core of the Great Pyramid stood unbroken. Its foundation did not crack. Its interior did not collapse. It simply remained as it always had. But why was it built this way? Why, for a tomb, does it exhibit a level of structural engineering that surpasses anything else in the ancient world? Did the builders foresee the need for permanence beyond their own lifetimes? Were they guarding something not just a king, but a legacy against time and disaster alike? Perhaps the pyramid was never meant to be just a tomb. Perhaps it was something else, an anchor, a stabilizer, a monument to eternal balance. Or perhaps the reason is simpler and stranger still, that they knew the earth would shake, and they chose to answer it with silence, with stone, with something that would not fall. Whatever the truth, the Great Pyramid remains not just an artifact, but a phenomenon, a challenge to our understanding of what ancient minds were capable of, a reminder that even in the oldest stones there are lessons yet unlearned. The story of its endurance is not one of defiance, but of harmony, a structure so deeply embedded in its environment that it seems to move with the earth's breath rather than resist it. And in that, there is something almost poetic, a message from the past not in words, but in weight and shape and shadow. We were here. We understood something, and we left it standing for you to discover. There are places where stone no longer looks like stone, where the surface of ancient granite, usually stubborn, uneven, fractured, has been transformed into something so smooth, so precise, so alien to the touch that it seems no human chisel could have made it. You see it not only in Egypt, but in Peru, in India, and in places where time itself has forgotten the builders. Slabs of granite with razor-straight edges, perfectly carved circles, hollowed out interiors that seem too symmetrical, too mathematically flawless to be the work of men with copper tools. Some stones are cut so precisely that even today's engineers look on with awe, as if the rock had been parted not by force, but by light. In the highland sun of Egypt, beside the Nile's patient flow, stands an incomplete obelisk. Left halfway in the bedrock of Aswan's granite quarries, this single monument would have been the largest known obelisk ever erected. But it cracked before completion, and so it remains where it was born, embedded in the earth, immense and still. Its sides are smooth, the corners sharp. The troughs carved beneath it show markings so consistent and clean, many have wondered whether it was made with a technology no longer understood. The unfinished obelisk is not alone. In many places around the world, we find hints of something similar. At Sacsayhuaman in Peru, immense walls of interlocking stones fit together with no mortar stones, with curves and notches that suggest machining, not hammering. In India's Ellora caves, entire temple complexes were carved downward into solid basalt, featuring columns and patterns that today would require heavy machinery and planning software. And yet, these were created centuries, sometimes millennia, before such tools existed. So, how exactly did ancient builders manage to cut and shape stone with such uncanny precision? Mainstream archaeology provides answers. Patient work, ingenuity, trial and error. Copper tools, sand, abrasion, fire, and water. These methods, they say, are enough when given time, enough labor, and the will to build. But the debate lingers, and with it, the silence of the stones grows louder. There are certain cuts that seem not only precise, but impossible. At the Serapeum of Saqqara, massive granite boxes rest in subterranean chambers. Each box weighs dozens of tons, carved from single blocks polished inside and out, and so perfectly squared that laser levels today still find no error. Their corners are nearly perfect right angles, their interiors polished to a mirror sheen. And perhaps most curiously, the lids of these boxes fit with such tightness that air itself seems reluctant to pass through. To carve such things in granite, which is one of the hardest natural stones, ranked at about 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale, using copper tools, would require years of abrasion and a tolerance for error approaching zero. And yet here they are, not one box, not two, but more than 20, sitting quietly in the darkness like sarcophagi from a lost dimension. Some researchers have suggested that ancient builders may have used unknown techniques, sonic vibration perhaps, or tools powered by energy sources long forgotten. Others point to the lack of chisel marks, the uniformity of the cuts, and the peculiar resemblance to methods seen in modern machine tooling. Then there are the core drill holes. In various ancient sites, notably around the Giza Plateau, one can find examples of cylindrical holes drilled straight through hard stone. Granite cores left behind in museums bear the spiral markings of the drill that created them. What's strange is not only the depth and width of these holes, but the speed implied by the striation spirals so steep that they would require rotational force far beyond what a hand-turned drill could manage. Engineer Christopher Dunn has famously examined these cores, suggesting they reflect a kind of precision machining unknown in ancient times. Dunn's work has sparked both interest and criticism. Traditional archaeologists argue that the core samples have been misread, that similar results can be achieved with persistence and sand. But the argument persists not in the language of academia, but in the feeling one gets when standing before these stones. That here in the quiet sun is something that doesn't quite make sense, because stone by its nature resists order. It chips, it breaks unpredictably, it yields only under tremendous effort. Yet the ancient stones at these sites seem to tell a different story of elegance, of precision, of a mastery over matter itself. In the Osirian Deep, in the sands of Abydos, massive granite blocks form a chamber so symmetrical and pristine it seems more like a modern power station than a temple. The walls reflect light in strange ways. The floor is set with such care that even millennia of earthquakes have failed to misalign it. Some of the blocks weigh over 100 tons, yet they were placed with such casual perfection, one might imagine they were simply floated into place. Of course, that's just a metaphor. But what if it weren't? What if somewhere in the haze between myth and memory, the ancient world once held technologies now vanished, not necessarily alien, not necessarily mystical, but human in origin, then lost to war, to flood to time? Many ancient cultures speak of a golden age, a time before the present cycle of civilization. In India, it was the Satya Yuga. In Egypt, Zep Tepi the first time, a period when gods walked among men, or perhaps more accurately, when humans achieved heights now forgotten. These tales speak of knowledge passed down or hidden away, of tools that could levitate stone, command fire, or transmute matter. To modern ears, they sound like legend, but so too did the stories of Troy until Heinrich Schliemann dug it up. So we must ask, is it possible that what we see in these laser-like cuts is not a coincidence, that they are not simply the result of unskilled hands growing lucky through repetition, but evidence of a knowledge older than we've allowed ourselves to believe? We don't know. But the stones do. They remain unmoved, untouched by time. Their cuts still clean, their angles still crisp, as if the moment of their making lingers in the material itself, whispering, not shouting, waiting to be heard. And perhaps if we listen closely enough, not just with ears, but with a quiet mind, we might begin to hear it. Not the answers, not yet, but the question. A question etched into granite, a mystery written in light. Long before the rise of Rome, before the construction of the Parthenon or the birth of Confucius, there was a civilization that stretched across the floodplains of what is now Pakistan and northwest India. It was vast, larger than Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt in its time. Its cities were sophisticated, laid out in perfect grids with advanced sewage systems, standardized brick sizes, and even multi-story homes. It had no known kings, no evidence of great military conquest, no monumental temples or glorified palaces, and yet it thrived. This was the Indus Valley Civilization, sometimes called the Harappan Civilization. It flourished from roughly 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE. Then, in a manner as silent as it was mysterious, it vanished. Not with fire, not with sword, but with a kind of quiet fading, a slow dissolution into the dust of history. What makes the story of the Indus Valley so haunting is not only how little we know, but how much we can almost see. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, unearthed beneath layers of earth, reveal an urban planning unmatched for its time. Streets aligned with compass precision, homes with private wells and bathrooms, a civic logic that suggests a deep commitment to order, cleanliness, and collective life. No pyramids, no colossal statues of rulers, no tombs proclaiming divine bloodlines. Instead, drains, water tanks, workplaces. Who were these people? What did they believe? How did they organize themselves? They left behind thousands of seals, small carved tablets bearing the images of animals and symbols. These are not mere decorations. They are a script, a written language, perhaps one of the oldest known, but it remains undeciphered. Despite decades of effort, no one has been able to read it. Without a bilingual inscription, like the Rosetta Stone, for Egyptian hieroglyphs, this language remains locked away. A voice from the past we can hear only in silence, and so we are left with questions. One such question haunts the very core of ancient studies. How could such a developed civilization, so widespread, so technologically advanced, vanish so completely? Some have pointed to environmental change, shifts in the monsoon cycle, a gradual drying of the Sarasvati River, once a lifeline for these communities. Others speak of tectonic events, earthquakes that may have altered river courses, cutting off cities from water. There is also evidence of floods. Layers of silt covering some Harappan ruins suggest repeated inundation. Perhaps the environment simply became too unstable, and people moved away in small groups over time, leaving no dramatic trace. But environmental decline is rarely the whole story. Archaeologists have found signs of gradual urban decay. In later layers of excavation, bricks are no longer uniform. Planning becomes chaotic. Public works fall into disrepair. The craftsmanship of seals and pottery deteriorates. These changes hint at a breakdown in social cohesion, something harder to explain with river patterns alone. There are no signs of invasion, no burned layers, no skeletal remains showing violence on a large scale. If there was conflict, it left no visible wound. And then there is the mystery of cultural transmission. Unlike Mesopotamia, whose legacy filtered into Babylon and Assyria or Egypt, whose religion and art echoed through centuries, the Indus Valley left behind almost nothing. No known mythology, no texts, no names. Even their descendants, presumably the people of later Vedic India, seem to have little to say about them. As if a veil was drawn, as if memory itself had collapsed. Yet subtle echoes remain. Some researchers have traced threads from the Indus world into early Hinduism. The yogic posture of a horned figure on a Harappan seal bears resemblance to Shiva Pashupati, Lord of Beasts. The use of ritual bathing, sacred fire altars, and even urban layout may have filtered into later traditions. But these links are tenuous, interpretive, hinted at, never confirmed. More mysterious still is the uniformity of the civilization. Across a territory the size of Western Europe, the Harappans used standardized weights measures and construction techniques. This suggests a high level of communication and shared governance. Yet we find no royal decrees, no records of conquests or law codes. It is as though they achieved unity without tyranny, order without kings. Some have suggested that their society was built around a council model, decentralized yet cooperative. Others speculate that religious or philosophical principles governed life quietly without spectacle. Perhaps their greatest monument was not a temple or tomb, but the city itself, a living organism designed for balance for peace. It's tempting to romanticize such a society, but even utopias fall. And in the Harappan case, the fall was not spectacular, but eerie in its completeness. One by one, cities were abandoned. Populations thinned, trade dwindled, and a light went out. Today, Mohenjo-Daro stands like a ghost of order. Its straight streets fill with sand. The great bath, once shimmering with clean water, now holds only the sky. Visitors walk its dusty lanes and feel not ruin, but absence, not destruction, but forgetting. And yet the stones remain, and the seals, and the script waiting to be read. Perhaps one day a forgotten tablet will be found bearing the same text in two scripts. Perhaps AI will crack the code, or perhaps somewhere buried beneath centuries of soil and sediment, there lies another city, still untouched, holding the key to their story. Until then, we can only listen to the silence, a silence shaped like civilization, a mystery not of war or power, but of vanishing. And in that vanishing, a question. How much of our own world, with all its brilliance and fragility, rests on threads just as thin? What will remain of us when we too are gone? Will our drains speak louder than our monuments? Or will our silence, like theirs, be our final masterpiece? Among the many enigmas that circle the Great Pyramid of Giza, one quietly rests at the edge of possibility, not in the shape of its form or the geometry of its layout, but in the very substance of its being. For while tourists walk in the shadow of its colossal silhouette, marveling at its ancient majesty, few pause to ask a more primal question. Where did the stones come from? Not the thousands of limestone blocks from nearby quarries, but those rare and ponderous granite monoliths that line the king's chamber deep within. Blocks so immense, so dense, that moving them with modern machinery would be a feat of its own. And yet somehow, more than 4,000 years ago, before the wheel was said to have reached Egypt, before iron was worked, before the written word had matured, those blocks were transported from the quarries of Aswan, over 500 miles away. What does it mean to carry a 70-ton stone across a desert? What does it mean when it happens dozens of times with no surviving explanation, no tools left behind, no boats large enough to cradle them, no ramps or rollers to bear their weight across the sand? The stones of Aswan do not whisper the answers. They merely sit silent and resolved, having traveled farther than many people in their time ever would. They bear no etchings of how they were moved, no instruction or tribute carved into their faces, just mute mass and the enigma of movement across time, space, and logic. Aswan's granite is not like limestone. It is born of fire and cooled through ages of pressure, laced with quartz and feldspar, hard enough to blunt the copper tools that archaeologists say were in use at the time. It is the kind of stone you do not simply chisel and carry. It is the kind of stone that defies you. Yet it is precisely this material that was chosen for the most sacred inner sanctum of the pyramid. The king's chamber, veiled in that reddish granite, exudes a quiet gravity. Some say it hums, others claim its dimensions are no accident. But beyond the mystique, the practical question remains, how did these massive blocks arrive here? Modern maps draw a neat line between Aswan and Giza, some 800 kilometers north along the Nile, a river that both connects and divides. Today, the journey might take a few hours by train or boat, but imagine instead standing on the banks of the Nile 500 years ago. There are no cranes, no winches, no steel cables. A monolith stands beside the river, freshly cut, its presence almost unnatural against the desert backdrop. Around it, workers with copper tools and wooden sleds, no diesel engines, no hydraulics, just human determination, ingenuity, or something else. The standard explanation holds that these stones were floated downstream on barges using the Nile as a conveyor. But the granite blocks in question weigh up to 80 tons each. The largest known Egyptian barge that could handle such weight belongs to the much later Roman era. No ancient Egyptian vessels have been found that could support even half that load. Wooden boats would need to be reinforced in ways that leave no trace in surviving shipbuilding technology. And then there is the problem of loading the stone onto the boat. Even today, lifting 80 tons requires precision, cranes, massive counterweights, or complex mechanical systems. We have no evidence of such systems existing in the Old Kingdom period. Then comes the journey itself. The Nile was not always as placid or navigable as it is today. Seasonal floods, shifting sandbanks, and crocodile-infested shallows would have turned every voyage into a logistical nightmare. If the stones were ferried, they must have been guided by extraordinary seafarers, yet no maritime guilds, shipwright blueprints, or nautical records remain from that era, only the silence of stone and water. Let us imagine, for a moment, another path overland. This theory, while even more implausible, carries its own poetry. Dragging an 80-ton block across sand and rock would demand an army of men. Even with wooden sleds and lubrication techniques involving water or milk, as some suggest the effort required borders on the absurd. Such an endeavor would carve deep scars into the earth, leave behind staging areas, broken tools, fallen stones. But no such scars remain. The desert, though it keeps secrets well, often preserves traces of human effort. In this case, there is almost nothing. The stones simply arrived, and that is what makes this mystery so quiet, so haunting. We can argue, model, simulate. Engineers can estimate the manpower needed, some say hundreds, others thousands. But all of these remain shadows cast by modern minds trying to reconstruct an ancient act that defies their methods. The stones themselves are not theoretical. They sit inside the pyramid, testifying to their impossible journey with mute confidence. Some have dared suggest that perhaps the ancient builders knew something we do not, that the stones were not hauled in the way we imagine, but moved through principles lost to time. Magnetic manipulation, anti-gravity techniques, harmonics, ideas on the fringe of science, yet persistent in speculative circles. Tibetan legends speak of stones being lifted by sound. In Egypt, echoes of similar myths remain hints that the pyramids were not just monuments, but instruments. But the mainstream remains cautious, as it should. Archaeology must tread the line between wonder and reason. Still, reason alone has yet to solve this particular riddle. One alternative theory posits that the stones were not moved whole, but carved on site after being brought in smaller pieces. But close inspection of the granite blocks reveals a different story. Their grain patterns are unbroken. Their sheer size leaves little doubt they were shaped at the quarry and transported intact. Others have proposed the use of a now lost composite stone technology, essentially a form of ancient concrete. Yet chemical analysis consistently confirms the stone's natural origin. So we return to the central question, how? And the answer still is a kind of silence, a deep pause that reverberates through the ages, the kind of pause that makes us realize just how much we do not know. There is a strange comfort in that silence, a humility. For all our satellites and AI, our carbon dating and laser scanning, we remain, in some ways, no wiser than the first traveler who stood before the Great Pyramid and asked, "How did this come to be?" Perhaps that is the deeper mystery, not simply the movement of stone, but the endurance of wonder. The fact that something so old can still make us pause, still defy explanation, still pull at the edge of imagination. And perhaps the stone itself is the answer, not in its weight or grain, but in its presence. A monument not just to human effort, but to something older. A forgotten knowing, a pact with the earth and stars. A memory carved before memory was written down. Whatever the truth, it remains locked within those blocks beneath their grain, behind their silence held within the impossible path they once crossed. And so they sit immovable now, but once moved beyond all reason. And that perhaps is all we need to know. In the vast desert beyond Cairo, where the sands of time have buried kings and cities alike, a monument rises with such calm, silent authority that even the winds seem to bow before it. The Great Pyramid of Giza, eldest among the last surviving wonders of the ancient world, stands not merely as a relic of stone and geometry, but as a question carved into the bones of the earth. With its immense weight pressing into the bedrock and its weathered face defying millennia of sun and storm, it commands attention not only through its size, but through its quiet, impossible precision. For among its many enigmas, one stands out with unnerving clarity. The alignment of this pyramid to true north is so accurate, off by only a fraction of a single degree, that even our most advanced modern buildings rarely achieve the same perfection. To grasp the strangeness of this one, must let the modern noise fall away. Forget GPS. Forget lasers, satellites, and the grid of digital measurements that now encircle the planet. Step back into a time when North was known not by electronics, but by the sky. Imagine living under a night canopy, unmarred by pollution or city light, where constellations whispered ancient rhythms to shepherds, priests, and kings. To align a structure perfectly to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, required patient watching, careful reckoning, and an understanding of celestial cycles so intimate it verged on the sacred. But the accuracy seen in the Great Pyramid transcends patience. It transcends what simple sky gazing can offer. With a deviation of only about 3/60ths of a degree, it is so minutely aligned to true north that its error margin rivals modern observatories built with computer models and laser leveling systems. How then could a people working with copper tools and rolled logs thousands of years ago achieve what seems beyond the reach of reason? The mystery begins not with the structure, but with its setting. The Giza Plateau is not simply a flat plain where three pyramids happen to be built. It is a chosen place, a stage upon which geometry, astronomy, and myth were fused into something lasting. The pyramid itself, rising to what was once 146.6 meters before its capstone eroded or was removed, has four faces that once gleamed with polished white Tura limestone, reflecting sunlight with such brightness it was said to be visible from miles across the desert. Each of these faces was angled precisely to match the cardinal directions. And yet the tools to measure these directions with such faultless precision did not exist, at least not as we know them. Let us imagine the process. One might think the ancient Egyptians could have used the stars, perhaps the circumpolar ones which never set but spin around a fixed point in the sky. Ancient builders could have tracked these over long periods, marking where they crossed a horizontal line, finding the midpoint to determine true north. But even this method, though impressive, would be subject to human error, to atmospheric distortion, to the shifting wobble of Earth's axis over centuries. And yet somehow they achieved it without telescopes, sextants, or chronometers. Could there have been methods now lost, shadow measurements, water-based leveling systems, tools of copper and wood whose ingenuity defies our assumptions? Perhaps the answer lies not just in what we know, but in how we think. For centuries, the assumption has been that these people were primitive, capable of cleverness, yes, but not precision. That assumption, however, crumbles before the Great Pyramid's foundation. Not only does the entire structure rest upon a leveled base to within a fraction of an inch across nearly 230 meters, but its orientation aligns more closely with true north than even the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, constructed in the 17th century. This forces us to rethink what we mean by primitive. Some researchers propose the builders used the rising and setting points of certain stars to determine true cardinal directions, possibly using a method attributed to Thales or later Greek astronomers centuries after the pyramid was built. Others speculate the use of a plumb line over water, watching the sun's shadow at noon, then mirroring it across the day to find east and west, and by bisecting that angle north. These theories are clever, but none fully explain the exactness we see, especially given the scale. A tiny misjudgment over 230 meters would result in a noticeable shift. But it's not there. The pyramid faces the world like a compass needle forged in stone. And this isn't just a matter of coincidence or overinterpretation. Studies conducted by modern surveyors like Sir Flinders Petrie in the 19th century, and more recently with high-precision GPS equipment, have confirmed that the alignment is indeed astonishing. Flinders Petrie found that the east and west sides of the pyramid deviated from true cardinality by only about 4 arc minutes. Later measurements reduced that to 3.5 arc minutes. To put that in context, that's like shooting an arrow at a target more than 10 kilometers away and hitting the bullseye. The implications run deeper. Why would a culture obsessed with the afterlife care so deeply about such mathematical and spatial exactness? Some say it was symbolic, an earthly mirror of the heavens meant to anchor the pharaoh's soul to the order of the cosmos. Others see something more mechanical, a structure built not just as a tomb, but as a kind of beacon, a calendar, or even more radically, as part of an energy-generating complex tied to Earth's magnetic field. These are the edge theories, of course, the ones academia treats cautiously. But the pyramid invites them not because it answers these questions, but because it refuses to silence them. There are those who wonder if such precision could have been achieved without advanced surveying instruments, tools we've never found, possibly lost in the shifting sands or decayed beyond recognition. Could the ancients have had a forgotten knowledge passed down through oral tradition or sacred schools, linking geometry, cosmology, and ritual in a system now invisible to us? If so, why did it vanish? Why do later pyramids lack the same alignment and elegance, growing more crude and imprecise as centuries wore on? Then, of course, comes the unsettling notion, echoed across countless mythologies, that such knowledge was not entirely human. Texts speak of gods who descended from the sky, figures like Thoth, the god of wisdom, who gave language, mathematics, and architecture to mankind. Were these myths merely metaphors for sudden leaps in human consciousness, or encoded memories of something? Other ancient astronaut theories propose that beings from beyond our world gifted humanity the means to create these beacons in stone, aligned not just to Earth, but to the stars. Mainstream science rejects this, of course, and rightly demands evidence. Yet the pyramid remains unaltered, unyielding, a structure so exact that even our best engineers admire it with equal parts humility and disbelief. Standing at its base, as the desert wind sweeps past your ears and the sun bakes the horizon, it's easy to forget the hum of modernity. Here, in this ancient place, the pyramid speaks not with sound, but with stillness. Its stones are silent now, but they once echoed with hammers' chants, and perhaps with questions we no longer know how to ask. What purpose did such precision serve? Was it a message, a map, a machine, or simply the mark of a civilization that understood harmony in a way we have yet to rediscover? And what does it mean that this monument, built with staggering labor, mathematical genius, and unknown methods, points so faithfully to true north, an axis not just of geography, but of mystery itself? It seems to suggest that the ancients were trying to orient us not just toward the pole star, but toward a deeper truth, one that speaks of order in chaos, of meaning in the void, as if they were whispering across the ages. Look, there is a pattern, there is purpose. Perhaps that's the pyramid's greatest achievement, not the stones or the scale, but the questions it leaves behind. Questions that compel us to look not just outward toward history, but inward toward what we've forgotten and what we're still longing to understand. For in this monument, aligned so impossibly well to the very axis of our world, we find not just a marvel of engineering, but a mirror of human wonder. In the vast silence of the Egyptian desert, beneath skies that have watched millennia pass without a blink, stands a monument that has endured the breath of time and the shifting sands of countless generations. The Great Pyramid of Giza, etched against the horizon, like an angular mirage of stone and shadow, has inspired awe, reverence, and bewilderment for thousands of years. But of all its enigmas, one subtle detail rests quietly beneath its grandeur, a detail so precise, so exact in its measurement, that it seems almost impervious to human fallibility. Each side of the pyramid's massive base, spanning nearly 230 meters, differs from the others by less than 2 centimeters. In modern engineering, such precision would be admired. In a structure over 500 years old, it whispers of something deeper, not merely a technical feat, but a message, a riddle carved into the very foundation of the pyramid, as if left by hands that measured not with rope and stick, but with a knowledge still eluding our own. It is a riddle of numbers and angles, but also of silence. For the builders of the pyramid, left no blueprints, no written instructions, no visible process by which such perfection could be achieved. Only the stone remains, and it speaks in the language of impossible geometry. When modern surveyors armed with laser instruments and satellite imaging laid out the four sides of the pyramid's base, they were met not with the irregularities one might expect of ancient construction, but with a near miraculous consistency. West to east, north to south, the stones mark out a square so close to perfection that even today's machines would struggle to match it without error. The largest difference between any two of these immense sides is no more than 1.8 centimeters, less than the width of a human finger. How? That is the question which lingers not just in academic halls or archaeological forums, but in the quiet heart of those who have stood before the pyramid and felt its gravity, not merely physical, but something else, something intangible, a weight of intention. To understand the weight of that question, one must travel back to the time when this monument was rising from the earth, a time without digital precision, without automated cranes, without steel tools or lasers, or the comforting accuracy of computer models, a time when measuring distances meant walking them out, when aligning corners meant trusting sight lines that stretched across sand and sun. And yet from within that age of supposed technological infancy emerged a structure whose foundation holds truer than many buildings raised in the last century. The four sides nearly flawless, the corners almost perfect right angles, the surface aligned so precisely with the cardinal directions that its orientation remains closer to true north than the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. And amid all this majesty, the base so easy to overlook quietly reveals perhaps the most astonishing feat of all the impossibly minor deviation of its sides. We know that the ancient Egyptians were master builders. Their temples, their statues, their massive obelisks, and precisely carved lintels speak to an architectural tradition honed over generations. But nothing in the record prepares us for this degree of geometrical mastery. Not when the tools discovered simple copper chisels, wooden mallets, measuring ropes, and plumb bobs seem inadequate for the task. Not when the terrain itself posed challenges of topography, shifting sands, and uneven bedrock. And certainly not when we consider the labor, thousands of workers, some skilled, many, not building under a blazing sun with no margin for error over a span of 2 decades. How did they do it? And more than that, why did they do it? Why strive for such precision on a structure so massive that small deviations would scarcely have been noticed? No one climbing the pyramid steps, no one standing in its shadow would notice if one side were 3 or even 5 centimeters longer than another. The human eye would not detect it, and the human body would never feel it. And yet there it is, perfection hidden in plain sight. One theory suggests the builders used an early form of triangulation staking points and using sight lines from elevated platforms to ensure straightness and alignment. Another speaks of water levels, vast trenches filled with water to create a flat plane upon which the base could be laid. Ingenious perhaps, but still difficult to reconcile with the minuscule tolerances achieved. Some researchers propose that the pyramid was laid out by referencing the stars, particularly the pole star or Orion's belt, giving the builders a cosmic compass by which to measure their world. If true, then it suggests not just a practical purpose, but a philosophical one. That the pyramid was not merely a tomb, not merely a monument, but a map, a model, a mirror. For in the ancient world, geometry was not just mathematics, it was sacred. Shapes had meaning. Lines could direct energy. Angles could harness the forces of the heavens. And to inscribe a perfect square upon the earth, aligned with the stars, constructed with a precision that borders on the impossible, was to make a declaration that this was not just a monument to kingship, but to knowledge, to permanence, to the harmony of heaven and earth. Yet even as we marvel at the execution, we are left with a deeper mystery. What drove this pursuit of perfection? Was it merely the ego of a pharaoh demanding that no stone betray his glory? Was it the ambition of a priesthood encoding cosmological truths into geometry? Or was it something older still, some inherited tradition passed down from a civilization now lost, whose understanding of mathematics, measurement, and meaning far exceeded what we assume of the ancient world? Perhaps the secret lies in the very act of building, in the process of turning vision into matter, in the way each stone was placed not just with strength, but with intention. Perhaps the builders were guided not only by instruments, but by intuition, a collective sense of balance, harmony, and rightness that we can scarcely imagine. Or perhaps the real mystery is not how they built it, but how we lost the ability to understand it. In a world that worships speed over stillness, quantity over quality, we have forgotten how to listen to stone, how to read the language of alignment and proportion, how to feel the weight of a measurement that differs by less than a breath. What we are left with, then, is not just a question of engineering, but a question of perception, of humility. For every time we think we have understood the ancients, the Great Pyramid humbles us anew. Every time we believe we have measured the past, it reminds us that the past is still measuring us. And so the base of the Great Pyramid becomes more than stone. It becomes a challenge, a mirror, a whisper from across the centuries asking not simply how we build, but why. What are we trying to align with? What truth are we carving into the ground? What story are we telling not just to the world, but to time itself? As the last echoes of the 20th mystery fade into the silence of ancient stone and buried sand, we find ourselves standing at the edge of something far older and deeper than the stories we have just told. We have walked through forgotten cities and lost temples, followed the shadows of vanished empires, and traced the outlines of civilizations whose fingerprints still cling to the earth like whispers on stone. In each chapter, we uncovered not just anomalies or puzzles, but pieces of a much larger mosaic one, woven from wonder, from silence, from the enduring question that haunts every ruin. What did they know that we have forgotten? For in every megalith raised against the sky, in every chamber sunk into the earth, there lingers a memory not entirely erased. These are not merely the remnants of ancient architecture, but the residue of ancient thought. Each stone placed with intent, each axis aligned with the heavens, each myth echoing the weight of truth beneath its poetry. We saw the Great Pyramid speak in geometry finer than modern tolerances. We stood at Göbekli Tepe, a temple too old to be possible. We wandered lost corridors beneath Giza and contemplated star maps carved into desert walls. And time and again, We met the same mystery, wearing different faces, precision without explanation, complexity without context, and a depth of vision that modern minds still strain to understand. What binds these mysteries together is not just their impossibility, but their silence. None of these ancient structures boast of their creators. No stele shouts, "I did this." No blueprint remains, no diary of invention. Instead, they leave us with riddles, quiet, enduring, unyielding. They ask without asking, "Who are you to measure us?" when you do not yet understand what we measured. The ancients built for more than function. They built for meaning. Their cities mirrored constellations. Their monuments echoed cosmic rhythms. Their myths were not distractions from reality, but windows into it. And in their silence lies a humility we may yet need to learn, that not all knowledge shouts. Some simply endures. We live in an age of answers, of data, of immediacy. But the ancients remind us that some truths require stillness. That mystery is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of depth. And perhaps that is why these enigmas continue to haunt us, not because they resist explanation, but because they demand reverence. So let us not rush to explain them away. Let us resist the temptation to fit them neatly into boxes crafted by modern minds. Let us instead sit with their strangeness, allow their precision to unsettle us. Let their age humble our timelines. Let their silence become a mirror. And if along the way we rediscover not only what they built, but why they built it, then perhaps we will find that these mysteries are not relics of a forgotten world, but signposts, markers, echoes of a deeper human longing to understand, to align, to remember who we once were. This journey, though rooted in the past, is far from over, for the earth still holds secrets beneath its soil, and the stars still cast shadows on stone. And somewhere, buried in time's great silence, the ancient world still waits for us to listen.